Paul Murphy's genitals become the center of an alien world's attention as his escape pod slams into the purple soil of Zorna. The impact jars his body, tearing his spacesuit and exposing what will soon be revered as a sacred appendage. Dazed and aching, Paul crawls from the smoking wreckage. His vision clears to reveal a circle of bipedal creatures surrounding him. Their iridescent scales shimmer in the alien sunlight, large eyes fixed on the human intruder. One of the aliens steps forward. Paul's translator identifies her as female, named Ivy. She towers over him, her gaze sweeping his battered form. Paul opens his mouth to speak, but a wave of pain silences him. He shifts, trying to stand, and his torn suit gapes wider. Ivy's eyes widen. She drops to her knees, prostrating herself before Paul. The other aliens follow suit, pressing their scale forms to the purple vegetation. Great One, Ivy intones, her translator conveying reverence. You have come as foretold. Your sacred appendage will bring change to our world. Paul blinks, uncomprehending. He glances down, realizing his exposure. Heat floods his face as he tries to cover himself. No, wait, he stammers. I'm just a lost human. I need help. His words fall on deaf ears. Ivy rises, gesturing to her companions. Prepare the welcoming ceremony, she commands. Our new god has arrived. The aliens scatter, leaving Ivy to tend to Paul. She approaches cautiously, her movements deliberate as she examines his injuries. Her touch is gentle, but she maintains a respectful distance from his lower half. Paul's head spins, overwhelmed by pain and the alien environment. He tries again to explain, but Ivy shushes him with a scaled finger to her lips. Rest, Great One. All will be revealed in time. As Ivy ministers to him, Paul notices activity in the distance. Word of his arrival spreads like wildfire across the alien landscape. He sees figures rushing about, some bowing in his direction, others gesturing animatedly in what appears to be heated debate. A faint beeping catches his attention. His escape pod's distress signal activates, sending his location to Earth. Paul's heart races, realizing the potential consequences. A rescue mission will come, but what will they find? A diplomatic incident in the making, all because of a misunderstood body part? Ivy helps Paul to his feet, supporting his weight. Come, Great One, your people await. She leads him toward a gathering crowd of scaled aliens, all eyes fixed on his torn suit. Paul limps forward, mind reeling. He's light years from home, injured, and mistaken for a deity. Somehow, he must navigate this alien culture, communicate his true identity, and prevent an interplanetary crisis. All while being worshipped for the one thing he never expected to be revered. As they approach the assembled Zornians, Paul steels himself. He's an astronaut, trained for the unexpected. But no simulation could have prepared him for this. With each step, the fate of two species hangs in the balance, all hinging on a cosmic misunderstanding and the contents of his pants. Paul's mind raced as Ivy led him towards the gathered Zornians. The alien crowd parted, revealing a path to the heart of their civilization. As they walked, the purple vegetation gave way to intricate structures of shimmering metal and crystal, forming the outskirts of Xylithia, the planet's capital city. News of Paul's arrival spread, like wildfire, through the alien metropolis. Zornians of all sizes and shades of iridescent scales lined the streets, their large eyes fixed on the human they believed to be their prophesied deity. Paul's torn suit fluttered in the warm breeze, exposing glimpses of his sacred appendage to the reverent onlookers. As they approached the city center, Paul noticed a commotion near a towering edifice. 7 elderly male Zornians, their scales a dull gray, hurried into the building. Ivy leaned close, her scales brushing against Paul's arm. "The Gorn High Council," she whispered. "They gather to discuss your arrival, Great One. Paul opened his mouth to protest once more, but Ivy's gentle touch silenced him. She guided him past the council chambers towards an even more impressive structure, a massive temple that seemed to touch the alien sky. "The Temple of Ascension," Ivy announced, her voice filled with awe. "Your new home, Great One." As they climbed the temple steps, Paul's gaze was drawn to the intricate carvings adorning its walls. The alien artwork depicted scenes of a being descending from the stars, bearing what appeared to be an exaggerated representation of human male anatomy. Inside the temple, a group of female Zornians awaited them. Their scales shimmered with a brilliance that outshone even Ivy's. They bowed deeply as Paul entered, then rose and approached with containers of glowing liquid. "The sacred oils," Ivy explained. "You must be cleansed and anointed, Great One." Before Paul could object, the acolytes began to remove what remained of his torn spacesuit. Their touch was gentle but alien, sending unfamiliar sensations through his body. He felt exposed and vulnerable, yet strangely exhilarated. As the acolytes worked, Paul noticed Ivy watching intently. Her large eyes tracked every movement, every reaction of his body to their ministrations. When their gazes met, Paul felt a spark of connection that transcended their biological differences. The cleansing ritual complete, Ivy dismissed the other acolytes. She approached Paul, holding out a garment of shimmering fabric. "You must be tired, Great One," she said softly. "Let me show you to your chambers." As they walked through the temple's winding corridors, Paul attempted to make sense of his situation. "Ivy," he began hesitantly, "I need to learn your language, to understand your people." Ivy's eyes lit up. "Of course, Great One. I would be honored to teach you." Over the following days, Paul and Ivy fell into a routine. Each morning, they would meet in a quiet chamber of the temple. Ivy would point to objects, speaking their Zornian names, which Paul would attempt to repeat. His clumsy pronunciations often led to laughter, breaking down the barriers between them. As Paul's grasp of the language grew, so did his understanding of Zornian society. He learned of the stark differences between male and female Gorn, noting the intelligence and grace of Ivy and her fellow priestesses. He found himself increasingly drawn to Ivy, captivated by her beauty and wisdom. One evening, as they sat watching Zorna's twin moons rise, Paul's translator picked up a commotion in the distance. Angry voices echoed from the direction of the council chambers. Ivy's expression darkened. "Zex," she hissed, "the military leader. He sees you as a threat, Great One." Paul's heart raced. He thought of the rescue mission surely on its way from Earth, of the potential conflict his presence might spark. He turned to Ivy, his voice urgent. "There's something I need to tell you," he began, but a sudden explosion rocked the temple. Ivy leapt to her feet, her scales flashing with alarm. "We must go," she said, grabbing Paul's hand. "It's not safe here." As they fled through the temple's back passages, Paul caught glimpses of armed Zornians clashing in the streets. Ivy led him to a hidden hangar where a sleek vehicle awaited. "Where are we going?" Paul asked as they boarded. Ivy's eyes gleamed with tenacity. "To the ancient ruins," she replied, "to uncover the truth of the prophecy and your destiny." The vehicle hummed to life, lifting off the ground. As they soared away from the chaos of Xylithia, Paul realized that his fate, and perhaps that of two worlds, now hung in the balance. The journey ahead would test not only his survival skills, but also the growing bond between him and Ivy. The vehicle soared over Xylithia's outskirts, leaving the chaos of the city behind. Paul gripped the edge of his seat, heart pounding as he watched the alien landscape blur beneath them. Ivy's scales shimmered with tension as she piloted the craft, her large eyes fixed on the horizon. As the last traces of civilization faded from view, Paul turned to Ivy. "What exactly are these ruins? And how will they reveal my destiny?" The word felt strange on his tongue, laden with implications he wasn't sure he was ready to face. Ivy's gaze remained focused ahead as she replied, "The ruins are the remnants of our ancestors' first settlement on Zorna. They contain ancient texts and artifacts that speak of the prophecy in greater detail. If we can decipher them, we may understand the true nature of your arrival and its meaning for our people." Their conversation was cut short as the vehicle's sensors began to beep urgently. Ivy's scales flashed with alarm as she guided the craft lower, bringing it to a gentle landing on the edge of a vast, pulsating swamp. "We cannot go further by air," Ivy explained, her voice tight with concern. "The swamp's gases interfere with our propulsion systems. We must cross on foot." As they exited the vehicle, Paul was struck by the alien beauty of the landscape. Bioluminescent plants cast an eerie glow across the murky water, while strange, warbling calls echoed from unseen creatures. He took a deep breath, only to double over coughing as the toxic atmosphere burned his lungs. Ivy rushed to his side, her scales flickering with worry. "The swamp's air is poisonous to you," she realized. Without hesitation, she began gathering nearby plants, her movements swift and precise. Paul watched in amazement as Ivy's deft hands wove the flora into an intricate mask. She placed it over his nose and mouth, adjusting it carefully. "This should filter the toxins," she explained. "Breathe slowly." As Paul's breathing eased, Ivy led him to the swamp's edge. They began their perilous journey, each step carefully placed on the spongy, bioluminescent vegetation. The alien environment assaulted Paul's senses. The squelch of their footsteps, the acrid smell that penetrated even his makeshift mask, the ghostly glow that danced across Ivy's scales. Their progress was slow, but steady until a series of ripples in the nearby water caught Paul's attention. He froze, eyes widening as a creature rose from the murky depths. It was massive, with multiple glowing eyes and rows of needle-sharp teeth. "Swamp predator," Ivy hissed, her scales flattening against her body in fear. "There are more behind us." Paul's mind raced as he assessed their situation. The creatures were closing in, cutting off their escape routes. His gaze fell on a cluster of particularly bright plants near the water's edge. "Ivy," he whispered urgently, "can we uproot those plants?" Understanding dawned in Ivy's eyes. They worked quickly, tearing the bioluminescent flora from the swampy soil. As the first predator lunged, Paul hurled a glowing plant directly into its gaping maw. The creature recoiled, momentarily blinded by the sudden burst of light. Paul and Ivy seized their chance, tossing more plants to create a protective barrier of pulsating luminescence around them. The disoriented predators thrashed in confusion, allowing the unlikely pair to slip away into the swamp's depths. As they finally reached solid ground on the far side of the swamp, Paul collapsed exhausted. Ivy knelt beside him, her scales shimmering with a mix of concern and admiration. "You saved us," she said softly, reaching out to adjust his mask. Their hands brushed, and a jolt of electricity seemed to pass between them. Paul gasped, more from surprise than discomfort, as a tingling sensation spread from the point of contact. Ivy jerked back, her scales flickering rapidly in what Paul had come to recognize as confusion. "What was that?" Paul asked, his voice hoarse from exertion and the lingering effects of the swamp's atmosphere. Ivy's large eyes blinked rapidly. I'm not sure," she admitted. "I've never experienced anything like it." As they made camp for the night, the accidental touch lingered in both their minds. Paul found himself stealing glances at Ivy, noting the grace of her movements and the intelligence that shone in her eyes. He realized with a start that he was beginning to see her as more than just an alien guide. She was becoming a friend, perhaps even something more. As they sat by the small fire Ivy had built, Paul cleared his throat awkwardly. "Ivy, I've been meaning to ask. Your people seem very different from humans physically. How do Gorn, reproduce?" Ivy's scales shimmered with what Paul interpreted as amusement. "We reproduce asexually," she explained. "Our bodies contain all the necessary genetic material. When the time is right, we enter a state of metamorphosis and emerge with our offspring." Paul nodded, fascinated. "So you don't have external reproductive organs?" "No," Ivy replied, her gaze dropping to Paul's lower half. "Which is why your anatomy is so fascinating to us. It's unlike anything in our biology." Their conversation was interrupted by a distant rumble. Paul tensed, but Ivy placed a reassuring hand on his arm. "Just a storm," she said. "We should rest. Tomorrow, we reach the abandoned outpost. There, we may find answers." As Paul settled into his makeshift bed, his mind whirled with the day's events. He had faced alien predators, crossed a toxic swamp, and felt a connection with Ivy that defied explanation. Whatever answers awaited them at the ruins, he knew that his presence on Zorna had already set in motion changes that neither he nor the Gorn could have anticipated. In the flickering firelight, Paul watched Ivy's sleeping form, her scales gently pulsing with bioluminescence. He realized that his fate was now inexorably linked with hers, and with the future of her entire species. As he drifted off to sleep, Paul wondered what new challenges the alien dawn would bring. As he drifted off to sleep, Paul wondered what new challenges the alien dawn would reveal. The first rays of Zorna's twin suns crept over the horizon, bathing the landscape in an otherworldly glow. Paul stirred, his muscles aching from the previous day's ordeal. He blinked away the remnants of sleep, taking in the unfamiliar surroundings. Ivy was already awake, her scales shimmering with anticipation. "We must move quickly," she said, offering Paul a hand. "The ruins are close, but Zex's forces may not be far behind." As they set out, the terrain began to change dramatically. The soft, swampy ground gave way to hard, crystalline formations that jutted from the earth at odd angles. Paul marveled at the structures, which refracted the alien sunlight into dazzling prismatic displays. "Watch your step," Ivy cautioned, her voice tinged with concern. "The crystals create shifting gravity fields. One wrong move could send you floating away." Paul nodded, concentrating on each careful step. Despite his efforts, he found himself stumbling as the gravity fluctuated around him. Ivy's hand shot out, steadying him. The now familiar tingle of their touch sent a shiver down his spine. "Thanks," he murmured, keenly aware of her proximity. As they navigated the treacherous crystal maze, a soft whimper caught Paul's attention. He paused, scanning the area until he spotted the source, a small, six-legged creature trapped beneath a fallen crystal shard. "Ivy, look," Paul said, already moving towards the injured animal. "We have to help it." Ivy hesitated, her scales flickering with indecision. "We don't have time for this, Paul. Zex could—" "Please," Paul interrupted, his eyes pleading. "I can't just leave it here to suffer." After a moment, Ivy's expression softened. She nodded, joining Paul beside the trapped creature. Together, they assessed the situation. The crystal was too heavy for Ivy to lift alone, but with Paul's human strength, they stood a chance. "On 3, Paul said, positioning himself. 1, 2, 3. They heaved in unison, Paul's muscles straining as Ivy guided the crystal's movement. With a final push, they shifted the shard enough for the creature to wriggle free. It chirped gratefully before scampering off into the crystal forest. Ivy watched the creature disappear, her scales pulsing with a warm glow. "That was kind," she said softly. "You continue to surprise me, Paul." The moment was interrupted by a distant rumble. Paul's heart raced as he remembered the danger pursuing them. Without a word, they pressed on, their pace quickening. As they crested a final ridge, Paul's breath caught in his throat. Before them sprawled a vast complex of weathered structures, their architecture unlike anything he had seen on Zorna. Ancient symbols adorned massive stone pillars, while strange, dormant machines dotted the landscape. "The ruins," Ivy whispered, her voice filled with awe. "We've made it." They approached cautiously, Paul's eyes darting from one marvel to the next. As they neared the central structure, the ground beneath their feet began to shift. Paul stumbled, grabbing Ivy for support as a hidden mechanism whirred to life. A section of the earth slid away, revealing a hidden entrance. "It's responding to our presence," Ivy said, her scales flickering with excitement. The ancients must have left safeguards to protect their secrets. They descended into the darkness, the air growing cooler with each step. Suddenly, the chamber around them blazed to life. Holographic displays flickered into existence, filling the space with ethereal light and unfamiliar symbols. "It's incredible," Paul breathed, reaching out to touch a shimmering projection. His hand passed through it, sending ripples across the image. Ivy moved to a central console, her fingers dancing across its surface. "Paul, look at this," she called, her voice urgent. As Paul joined her, the holograms coalesced into a single, massive display. It showed two distinct figures, one clearly Gorn, the other unmistakably human. Between them pulsed a strand of what Paul recognized as DNA. "The prophecy," Ivy gasped. "It's not about worship or conquest. It's about genetic diversity." The hologram shifted, showing a timeline of Gorn evolution. Paul watched in fascination as the images depicted a catastrophic event, followed by a drastic change in Gorn physiology. "Our ancestors," Ivy explained, her voice filled with wonder and growing comprehension. "They altered our genetics, removing our ability to reproduce sexually." "But why?" Before Paul could respond, a mechanical voice filled the chamber. "Protocol Alpha initiated. Genetic recombination, safeguard activated." The hologram swirled, reforming to show a projection of Paul and Ivy standing side by side. Lines of code and genetic sequences flowed between their figures. "Compatible DNA detected," the voice continued. "Initiating species salvation protocol." Paul and Ivy exchanged stunned glances as the implications sank in. Their growing attraction, the tingling sensation when they touched, it wasn't just personal. It was the key to saving the entire Gorn species. The moment of revelation was shattered by a violent explosion that rocked the chamber. Alarms blared as chunks of debris rained down from above. Through the newly formed hole in the ceiling, Paul could see a familiar figure descending on a hovering platform. Zex had found them, seized them. The military leader roared, his eyes gleaming with malice. "The human must not be allowed to corrupt our sacred prophecy." Paul grabbed Ivy's hand, pulling her away from the advancing Gorn soldiers. In his panic, he stumbled against an ancient control panel. A surge of energy coursed through the ruins, and brilliant force fields sprang to life, separating Paul and Ivy from their pursuers. "No!" Zex howled, pounding against the shimmering barrier. "You can't hide forever, human. This technology, this power, it belongs to the Gorn." Paul and Ivy found themselves being pushed deeper into the complex by the shifting energy fields. As they ran, more systems began to activate, sending pulses of energy radiating out from the ruins. "What's happening?" Paul shouted over the din of activating machinery. Ivy's scales flashed with a mix of fear and excitement. "The ruins. They're awakening other sites across Zorna. Paul, we just changed everything." As they delved deeper into the heart of the ancient facility, Paul realized that their discovery was only the beginning. The fate of two species now rested on their ability to uncover the full truth of the prophecy and find a way to share it with the rest of the Gorn before Zex could twist it to his own ends. The ruins rumbled around them, secrets waiting to be uncovered in every shadow. Paul and Ivy pressed on, their destinies now intertwined in ways neither could have imagined when they first met beneath Zorna's alien sky. Skies. Paul's heart raced with a mixture of anticipation and fear as they navigated the labyrinthine corridors of the ancient facility. "This way," Ivy called, her scales flickering with an urgent blue light. She led Paul through a narrow passageway, their footsteps echoing off the metallic walls. Suddenly, they emerged into a vast chamber that took Paul's breath away. The room was circular, its walls lined with pulsating holograms and strange, alien machinery. In the center stood a massive console, covered in intricate symbols and glowing buttons. As they approached, the room seemed to come alive. Holographic displays flared to life, bathing them in an ethereal blue glow. Paul felt a tingling sensation across his skin, and the console began to hum. "It's scanning you," Ivy said, her voice filled with awe. "The facility recognizes your human DNA." Before their eyes, the holograms coalesced into a swirling mass of information. Images of ancient Gorn flashed by, along with complex genetic diagrams and historical records. Paul watched transfixed as the story of the Gorn's past unfolded before them. "Thousands of years ago," Ivy translated, her scales pulsing with each word, "our people faced extinction. A plague threatened to wipe us out entirely." Paul nodded, his mind racing to keep up with the flood of information. "So your ancestors found a way to survive?" "Yes," Ivy replied, her voice tight with emotion. They removed our ability to reproduce sexually. It saved us from the plague, but at a terrible cost." As they delved deeper into the database, Paul's hand accidentally brushed against a glowing panel. The room shuddered, and a new series of holograms burst into existence. "Warning." An artificial voice echoed through the chamber, initiating genetic compatibility analysis. Paul and Ivy watched in stunned silence as the computer compared human and Gorn DNA. Strands of genetic code danced before their eyes, twisting and aligning in impossible patterns. "Analysis complete," the voice announced. "Human and Gorn DNA compatibility, 99. 9%. Ivy's scales flashed a brilliant white. "That's impossible," she whispered. Unless your ancestors engineered it that way," Paul finished, the realization dawning on him. "They must have known humans would come to Zorna someday." Before they could process this revelation, the facility rumbled to life. Energy surged through the ancient systems, and a beam of light shot up from the central console, piercing the ceiling. "What's happening?" Paul asked, steadying himself against the console. Ivy's eyes widened as she interpreted the data streaming across the holograms. "It's broadcasting to every Gorn settlement on Zorna." Outside the ruins, Zex and his forces halted their advance as the sky above them filled with shimmering projections. The truth about Gorn history and the prophecy's true meaning played out for all to see. Back in the control room, Paul and Ivy made another startling discovery. A hidden compartment in the console slid open, revealing a pulsating orb of energy. "The genetic library," Ivy breathed. "It contains our original, unmodified genome." As they examined the orb, alarms began to blare throughout the facility. Security feeds flickered to life, showing Zex and a group of loyal followers breaching the outer defenses. "They're coming," Paul said, his voice tense. "We need to make a decision." Ivy's scales rippled with conflicting emotions. If we stay, we might be able to initiate the restoration process. But if Zex captures us... Paul looked at the genetic library, then back at Ivy. The weight of their decision pressed down on him. The fate of the Gorn species, and perhaps the future of human-Gorn relations, hung in the balance. "Whatever we choose," he said, reaching out to take Ivy's hand, "we do it together." Ivy's scales flushed with a warm, pinkish hue. She nodded, squeezing Paul's hand. Together, They turned to face the main console, their free hands hovering over the controls that could begin the genetic restoration process. The sound of Zex's approaching forces grew louder, echoing through the ancient corridors. Paul took a deep breath, his eyes meeting Ivy's. In that moment, he saw not just an alien guide, but a partner, someone he had come to care for deeply. Whatever happened next would change everything, not just for the Gorn, but for them as well. "Ready?" he asked, his finger poised above the activation sequence. Ivy's scales shimmered with tenacity. "Ready." As they prepared to make their choice, the facility's defenses engaged, buying them precious seconds. Ancient force fields sprang to life, and hidden weapons emerged from the walls. The air crackled with energy and possibility. Paul and Ivy stood at the precipice of a new era for Zorna, their hands intertwined, their destinies now forever linked. With Zex's forces closing in and the future of an entire species in their hands, they steeled themselves for what was to come. Come. Their fingers hovered over the controls for a fraction of a second before they pressed down in unison, initiating the genetic restoration process. The ancient machinery hummed to life, energy coursing through the facility. Paul felt a tingling sensation spread from his fingertips up his arm as the console pulsed with an otherworldly light. Ivy gasped, her scales rippling with a cascade of colors. "It's working," she breathed, her voice filled with awe and a hint of fear. As the process began, the facility's defenses strengthened. Force fields shimmered into existence, creating a protective barrier around Paul and Ivy. The walls seemed to thicken, and hidden panels slid open to reveal advanced weaponry. Outside, Zex and his forces breached the outer chambers of the ruins. The military leader's eyes gleamed with a mix of rage and commitment as he led his most loyal followers deeper into the complex. But the ancient technology proved more formidable than anticipated. Holographic barriers sprang up, disorienting Zex's troops. Some soldiers found themselves trapped in endless loops, unable to distinguish reality from illusion. Others were herded away by automated defense systems that seemed to predict their every move. Back in the control room, Ivy's transformation accelerated. Her scales shifted, swirling with new patterns and hues never before seen in Gorn physiology. She gripped the console, her body trembling. "Paul," she said, her voice strained, "something's happening to me." Paul moved closer, supporting her as she swayed. "I'm here," he assured her, his arm around her waist. "We're in this together, remember?" Ivy nodded, leaning into him. As her body continued to change, Paul noticed subtle alterations in her facial structure and limbs. Her muscles seemed to shift beneath her scales, becoming more defined. "The sensations," Ivy whispered there. "Intense, but not painful. It feels like I'm becoming more me." A loud explosion echoed through the corridors, followed by the sound of heavy footsteps. Zex's voice carried through the air, filled with fury. "Find them. Destroy this abomination." Paul's grip on Ivy tightened as he glanced at the security feeds. Zex and a handful of his most devoted followers were cutting through the facility's defenses, inching closer to the central control room. Suddenly, a new alert flashed across the holographic displays. Paul squinted, trying to decipher the Gorn text. "Ivy, what does that say?" Ivy, her eyes clearer now as she adjusted to her changing body, read the message. It's the High Council. They're sending a peacekeeping force, led by Counselor Mira." Before Paul could respond, the door to the control room burst open. Zex stood in the entrance, his massive frame filling the doorway. His eyes locked onto Paul and Ivy, narrowing with hatred. "You," he snarled, raising his weapon. "You'll pay for this treachery." But as Zex stepped forward, he collided with the shimmering energy field surrounding Paul and Ivy. The barrier flared brightly, sending Zex stumbling backward. "It's over, Zex," Paul called out, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "The truth is spreading across Zorna. Your lies can't stand against it." Zex roared in frustration, ordering his soldiers to attack the energy field. Their weapons proved useless. Each blast absorbed and dissipated harmlessly. Some of the soldiers cried out as the backlash from their attacks knocked them off their feet. Desperate, Zex turned to a nearby control panel, his fingers flying over the alien symbols. Alarms blared throughout the complex as his tampering threatened to destabilize the delicate process underway. Paul sprang into action, his astronaut training kicking in. He moved to a secondary console, fingers dancing across the controls as he worked to counter Zex's efforts. Beside him, Ivy's newly enhanced strength and agility came into play as she fended off the remaining soldiers who had managed to breach the outer defenses. The genetic restoration reached a critical phase. Energy built up within the central console, pulsing with increasing intensity. Paul's eyes widened as he realized what was about to happen. "Ivy," he shouted, "brace yourself." A massive burst of energy erupted from the console, engulfing Paul, Ivy, and Zex in a blinding light. The wave expanded rapidly, passing through the walls of the ruins and spreading across the surface of Zorna. As the light faded, Paul blinked, his vision slowly returning. He turned to Ivy, gasping at the sight of her fully transformed body. Her scales now shimmered with an iridescent quality, and her physique had become a perfect blend of strength and grace. Zex lay on the ground, his body twitching as the energy reshaped his very being. Paul watched in amazement as the military leader's aggressive features softened, his eyes losing their hardened glare. Outside the ruins, the approaching peacekeeping force led by Mira arrived to find a scene of wonder and confusion. Transformed Gorn stumbled about, marveling at their new bodies and the strange new emotions coursing through them. Paul and Ivy stepped out of the protective field, hand in hand, ready to face the new world they had helped create. As they surveyed the changed landscape and the bewildered Gorn, they knew their journey was not nearly finished. The true challenge of guiding Zorna through this monumental transformation was just beginning. The true challenge of guiding Zorna through this monumental transformation was just starting. As Paul and Ivy stepped out of the ancient facility, they were met with a scene of wonder and chaos. The landscape before them had transformed along with its inhabitants. Gorn of all sizes and shapes stumbled about, their scales shimmering with new colors and patterns. Some gazed at their changed bodies in awe, while others huddled together, seeking comfort in the familiar amid the strange. Ivy's own transformation had stabilized, leaving her with a unique blend of traditional Gorn features and more human-like characteristics. Her scales now possessed an iridescent quality that seemed to shift with her emotions, and her physique had become a harmonious balance of strength and grace. "It's incredible," Ivy whispered, her voice tinged with awe as she surveyed the changed world around them. Paul nodded, squeezing her hand gently. "And a little terrifying," he added, watching as a group of Gorn nearby examined their altered limbs with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. The sound of approaching vehicles drew their attention. A convoy of sleek hovercrafts appeared on the horizon, bearing the insignia of the Gorn High Council. As they neared, Paul recognized the lead figure, Counselor Mira, her scales now a vibrant blend of blue and gold. Mira disembarked, her eyes wide as she took in the scene. "By the ancestors," she breathed, then quickly composed herself. "Secure the area," she ordered her troops. "Assist any who need help, and bring Zex and his followers to me." As Myra's peacekeepers spread out, Paul turned to Ivy. "We need to contact Earth," he said urgently. "The rescue mission. They have no idea what they're flying into." Ivy nodded, leading Paul back into the facility. They made their way to the communication array, its ancient technology humming with renewed energy. Paul's fingers flew over the controls, sending a message to Earth, explaining the situation on Zorna and urging caution. As they emerged from the ruins, they found Miro waiting for them. "The High Council has declared a planet-wide state of emergency," she informed them. "We need you both in Xylithia. Your expertise is crucial in managing this transition." Paul and Ivy exchanged glances, a silent understanding passing between them. It was then that they first noticed the strange connection that had formed, a symbiotic link that allowed them to sense each other's emotions and physical state. "We're ready," Paul said, speaking for both of them. The journey back to Xylithia was unlike anything Paul had experienced before. They passed through villages and towns, each a microcosm of the larger transformation sweeping across Zorna. In one settlement, they stopped to assist a group of Gorns struggling to understand their new forms. "Why do I feel different?" a young Gorn asked, his scales flickering between shades of green and blue. Ivy knelt beside him, her voice gentle. "Your body is changing, adapting. It might be scary, but it's also beautiful. You're becoming more of who you truly are." As they continued their journey, Paul noticed the landscape itself seemed to be changing. Ancient structures, long hidden beneath the surface, were emerging from the ground, pulsing with renewed energy. They arrived in Xylithia to find the city in a state of controlled chaos. The Gorn High Council, now a mix of partially transformed males and females, greeted them in the central chamber. Questions flew fast and thick, each council member eager for answers about the genetic restoration process. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the city. A council aide burst into the chamber, her scales flashing with urgency. "Ancient structures are activating across the planet," she reported breathlessly. "They're interfacing with our modern systems. Communications, transportation, everything is being affected." The council members turned to Paul and Ivy, their expressions a mix of hope and desperation. "We need your help," one of them said. "Will you lead a task force to investigate and stabilize these structures?" Before Paul could respond, a holographic display flickered to life in the center of the chamber. It was a message from Earth. The rescue mission had entered the Zornan star system and would arrive within days. Paul felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He glanced at Ivy, feeling her purpose and support through their newfound connection. He turned back to the council, his voice steady. "We'll do it," he said, "but we need to work fast. When that rescue ship arrives, we need to be ready to introduce them to the new Zorna peacefully." As night fell over Xylithia, Paul and Ivy stood on a balcony overlooking the city. The skyline was dotted with the glowing forms of reactivated ancient structures, their purpose still a mystery. In the streets below, transformed Gorn moved about, adapting to their new reality. Ivy leaned against Paul, her scales shimmering softly in the twilight. Through their link, he could sense her mix of excitement and apprehension. "What do you think we'll find in those ancient structures?" she asked. Paul shook his head, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "I don't know," he admitted. "But whatever it is, we'll face it together." As they stood there, the first stars of evening appearing in the sky, Paul couldn't help but wonder what challenges the coming days would bring. The rescue ship from Earth was on its way, carrying with it the potential for a new era of human-Gorn relations. But first, they had a planet to stabilize and a transformed society to guide. With a shared glance, Paul and Ivy turned from the balcony, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The task force awaited their leadership, and the mysteries of Zorna's past and future beckoned to be explored. As Paul and Ivy turned to rejoin the task force, a sudden commotion erupted in the streets below. Gorn citizens were gathering in large numbers, their scales flickering with a mix of confusion and excitement. The cause of their agitation became clear as Paul and Ivy made their way down to street level. Ancient structures, long dormant beneath the city, were emerging from the ground, pulsing with an otherworldly energy. Before they could investigate further, an urgent message came through their communication devices. They were being summoned to an emergency meeting with the Gorn High Council. The council chamber was a sight to behold when they arrived. The once familiar room now hummed with a strange energy, a blend of modern Gorn technology and newly awakened ancient systems. The transformed council members, their scales shimmering with newfound iridescence, were engaged in heated debate. As Paul and Ivy entered, a holographic projection materialized in the center of the room. It displayed a map of Zorna, dotted with dozens of glowing points representing newly activated sites. One location, pulsating with an intense energy signature, immediately drew everyone's attention. The Nexus of Convergence. Counselor Mira breathed, her scales shifting to a deep blue of awe and trepidation. It was believed to be nothing more than a myth. Paul stepped closer to the hologram, studying the pulsing light. What exactly is this nexus? An elder council member, his scales a mottled gray, spoke up. According to ancient texts, it's the central hub for all Gorn technology. If the legends are true, it could hold the key to stabilizing our planet's transformation. The council quickly reached a decision. Paul, Ivy, and Mira were tasked with leading an expedition to the Nexus. Their mission: to stabilize the facility and prevent a potential planet-wide technological meltdown. As they prepared for the journey, Paul received another transmission from the approaching human rescue team. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a renowned xenobiologist, was among the crew. Her message expressed both excitement and concern about the Gorn-human genetic compatibility they would encounter. The expedition set out at first light, their transport vehicles humming with a mix of old and new technology. As they traveled, they encountered groups of Gorn still grappling with their transformation. Some displayed enhanced physical abilities, leaping impossible distances or lifting objects far beyond their previous strength. Others exhibited new cognitive skills, solving complex problems with ease. Paul and Ivy used their unique bond to help these Gorn understand and control their evolving capabilities. Through their guidance, they gained valuable insights into the genetic restoration process. Their progress was halted when they reached a massive chasm, newly formed by the reactivation of underground Gorn structures. The team faced their first major challenge. "We can't go around it," Mira said, her scales flickering with frustration. "We'll lose too much time." Paul surveyed the chasm, his mind racing. "Then we build a bridge," he decided. What followed was a remarkable display of human ingenuity and Gorn abilities. Some team members used their enhanced strength to move massive boulders, while others with newfound mental acuity calculated precise structural requirements. Paul and Ivy coordinated the effort, their symbiotic link allowing them to anticipate each other's thoughts and actions. As they neared the outskirts of the Nexus, the team encountered a swirling vortex of energy surrounding the facility. Their equipment malfunctioned, forcing them to rely on instinct and their newfound abilities. Paul felt a surge of energy coursing through him as they approached. His connection with Ivy intensified, their minds linking more closely than ever before. Together, they found they could intuitively understand and interact with the ancient Gorn technology. Inside the Nexus, they discovered chambers filled with stasis pods containing unaltered Gorn genetic samples. These could be crucial for stabilizing the genetic restoration process and ensuring the long-term survival of the Gorn species. As they moved to secure the samples, the facility's defensive systems activated. Robotic guardians emerged from hidden alcoves, their weapons trained on the intruders. "Hold them off!" Paul shouted to Mira, who was already organizing a defensive formation. While Myra's team engaged the facility's defenses, Paul and Ivy raced to access the central control system. Their efforts were complicated by the arrival of a splintered group of conservative Gorn, led by Zex's former second-in-command. "Stop!" the leader of the conservative group cried out. "You'll destroy everything we are." A three-way conflict erupted within the Nexus. Paul, and Ivy worked frantically to stabilize the facility and secure the genetic samples. Myra's forces clashed with both the automated defenses and the conservative Gorn. All around them, the Nexus pulsed with increasingly erratic surges of energy. Amidst the chaos, Paul received an urgent communication. The human rescue team had entered Zorna's atmosphere and was requesting permission to land. He looked at Ivy, their shared link conveying the weight of the decision before them. As energy coursed through the Nexus, Paul and Ivy's symbiotic connection reached a new intensity. In a moment of clarity, they experienced a shared vision of Zorna's potential future, a harmonious blend of human and Gorn societies, working together to explore the stars. The vision faded, leaving them with a renewed sense of purpose. They turned their attention back to the central control system, their fingers flying over the ancient controls with newfound understanding. "We need to stabilize the core," Ivy said, her scales shimmering with willpower. Paul nodded, his focus absolute. "If we can regulate the energy flow, we might be able to bring the whole system under control." As they worked, the battle raged around them. Myra's voice came through their comms, strained but resolute. "Whatever you're doing, do it fast. We can't hold them off much longer." Paul's hands moved with precision over the alien interface, guided by an intuition he couldn't fully explain. Ivy worked alongside him, their movements perfectly synchronized. Suddenly, the energy surges began to stabilize. The chaotic pulses smoothed into a steady rhythm, and the facility's defenses powered down. The conservative Gorn, seeing the change, lowered their weapons. Their leader stepped forward, scales shifting from aggressive red to a more subdued blue. "What have you done?" he asked, a mixture of awe and uncertainty in his voice. Paul turned to address him, aware that his next words could shape the future of human-Gorn relations. "We've given all of us a chance," he said. "A chance to understand who we truly are and who we could become." As the dust settled, Paul received another transmission from Dr. Rodriguez. The human rescue ship was holding position in orbit, awaiting further instructions. Paul looked at Ivy, then at Mira and the assembled Gorn. The next steps they took would be crucial, not just for Zorna, but for the future of both their species. "It's time," Paul said, his voice steady. "Let's introduce them to the new Zorna." Zorna. Paul paused, his gaze sweeping across the diverse group before him. "But first, we need to secure this facility and manage the situation here." The urgency of their predicament became clear as another energy surge rippled through the Nexus. Paul made a swift decision, turning to Mira with a determined look. "Mira, I need you to lead a team back to Xylithia," he said, his voice firm. "Coordinate with the High Council and prepare for the human rescue team's arrival. We can't afford any misunderstandings when they land." Mira nodded, her scales shifting to a resolute blue. "Understood. What about you and Ivy?" "We'll stay here and complete the mission," Ivy answered, her eyes meeting Paul's. Through their link, he felt her unwavering support and shared grit. As Mira gathered her team and prepared to depart, Paul and Ivy delved deeper into the Nexus. The facility's corridors pulsed with an otherworldly light, guiding them towards its core. Their synchronized movements, a product of their unique bond, allowed them to navigate the complex with surprising ease. They soon found themselves in a vast chamber that took their breath away. At its center stood a massive biomechanical structure, its surface alive with pulsing lights and intricate patterns. This was the heart of the Nexus, a supercomputer of ancient Gorn design. "This has to be the key," Paul murmured, approaching the towering machine. "If we can interface with this, we might be able to stabilize the entire planet." As they worked to decipher the supercomputer's controls, an alarm blared through the chamber. The conservative Gorn group, led by a fierce-looking individual Paul recognized as Krull, Zex's former second-in-command, burst into the room. "Stop this madness!" Krull roared, his scales flaring an aggressive red. "You'll destroy everything we are." Paul and Ivy exchanged a quick glance, their linked minds formulating a plan without words. As Krull's forces surged forward, the pair sprang into action. Paul's human agility came into play as he ducked and weaved through the attackers, drawing their attention. Meanwhile, Ivy used her enhanced Gorn strength to protect the supercomputer, her movements fluid and precise. The chamber erupted into chaos. Energy bolts from Gorn weapons ricocheted off ancient walls as Paul and Ivy fought to keep the conservatives at bay. Their synchronized defense was a sight to behold. Where Paul dodged, Ivy struck, their actions complementing each other perfectly. As the battle raged, Paul and Ivy inched closer to the supercomputer's main interface. Their fingers danced across alien controls, guided by an intuition born of their symbiotic link. Slowly but surely, they began to make progress in stabilizing the system. Kilometers away in Xylithia, Mira arrived to find the city in a state of controlled frenzy. The Gorn High Council had received word of the approaching human rescue team and was scrambling to prepare. "We need a secure landing zone," Mira announced, taking charge of the situation. "Something that won't overwhelm them with the full extent of our transformation right away." As Mira coordinated the efforts in Xylithia, the human rescue ship made its final approach to Zorna. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the helm, her eyes wide as she took in the transformed landscape below. Ancient structures dotted the planet's surface, each pulsing with energy that their sensors struggled to categorize. "This is incredible," Elena breathed, her scientific mind racing with possibilities. "The genetic changes, the reactivated technology, it's beyond anything we could have imagined." Back at the Nexus, Paul and Ivy achieved a breakthrough. They initiated a planet-wide harmonization sequence, aiming to bring all reactivated Gorn structures under control. But as the process began, a massive energy surge threatened to overwhelm the facility systems. Alarms blared, and Paul's heart raced as he realized the potential consequences. "If this surge spreads to other structures," he shouted over the din, "it could endanger the human landing." Ivy's scales flickered with concern, but her voice remained steady. "We have to see this through, Paul. It's our only chance to stabilize Zorna." In that moment of crisis, their symbiotic link flared to new heights. Paul felt Ivy's unwavering trust in the ancient Gorn technology, and she sensed his human capacity for hope in the face of impossible odds. Together, they made the decision to push forward. As they worked feverishly to contain the energy surge, Krull made his final, desperate move. Breaking through their defenses, he lunged for the main control panel. Paul intercepted him, grappling with the larger Gorn. His human muscles strained against Krull's superior strength, but through their link, Ivy channeled some of her own power to Paul. This unexpected boost gave Paul the edge he needed. With a final surge of effort, Paul pinned Krull to the ground. "It's over," he gasped. "Let it go, Krull. This is the future of your people." As Krull's resistance faltered, Paul and Ivy completed the harmonization sequence. A wave of stabilizing energy pulsed outward from the Nexus, spreading across Zorna's surface. The reactivated structures began to integrate seamlessly with modern Gorn technology, their erratic behavior smoothing into a steady, controlled hum. Exhausted but triumphant, Paul and Ivy emerged from the Nexus. The conservative Gorn, witnessing the stabilization of their world, lowered their weapons in awe. A transmission from Mira crackled through their comms. "The human ship has landed safely," she reported. "Xylithia's systems are stable. We're ready for you here." Paul looked at Ivy, both of them aware that they stood at the threshold of a new era for humans and Gorn alike. The successful mission at the Nexus had averted disaster, but it had also opened the door to countless new questions and challenges. As they prepared to return to Xylithia and face the newly arrived humans, Paul felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. Their journey of discovery, both scientific and personal, was just getting started. The true test of their transformed society was just beginning. The true test of their transformed society was just starting. As Paul and Ivy prepared to leave the Nexus, they noticed a subtle shift in their surroundings. The ancient Gorn technology, now harmonized with the planet's systems, hummed with newfound energy. Translucent pathways materialized before them, pulsing with an ethereal light. "What's happening?" Paul asked, his voice tinged with wonder. Ivy's scales shimmered as she focused on the phenomenon. The harmonization. It's created new transportation networks. We can use these to reach Silithia faster. Their symbiotic link flared to life as they approached the glowing path. Instinctively, they reached out, their minds melding with the advanced technology. In an instant, they were whisked away, their bodies carried along the energy conduit at breathtaking speed. The journey to Xylithia was a blur of light and sensation. When they finally emerged, Paul gasped at the sight before them. The city had transformed beyond recognition. Floating platforms hovered at various levels, connected by shimmering energy bridges. Sleek structures that seamlessly blended ancient and modern Gorn architecture dotted the skyline. Gorn citizens moved through this new landscape, their expressions a mix of awe and unease. Some tested their newfound abilities, leaping between platforms with enhanced agility, while others huddled in groups, discussing the rapid changes. "It's incredible," Ivy murmured, her eyes wide as she took in the scene. They made their way to the newly constructed landing zone, where a human shuttle had just touched down. As the airlock hissed open, Paul felt a surge of anticipation. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stepped out first, her piercing green eyes scanning the area with scientific curiosity. She was followed by 4 male team members, all visibly stunned by the alien landscape. "Dr. Rodriguez," Paul called out, approaching the group. "Welcome to Zorna." Elena's gaze locked onto Paul, then shifted to Ivy. Her eyebrows rose in surprise. "Fascinating," she breathed, taking in Ivy's transformed appearance. The reports hardly did justice to the extent of the changes. Paul introduced Ivy, explaining their unique bond and her role in recent events. Elena listened intently, her fingers twitching as if longing to take notes. "If you wouldn't mind," Elena said, "I'd like to conduct some non-invasive scans. The data could be invaluable for understanding these transformations." Paul and Ivy exchanged a glance, then nodded their agreement. As Elena prepared her equipment, tension filled the air. Members of the Gorn High Council approached, their scales shifting colors nervously. "Humans," one council member hissed, "what are your true intentions here? We will not allow our technology to be exploited." Paul stepped between the groups, raising his hands placatingly. "Let's all take a breath. We're here to understand and help each other, not to exploit anyone." Ivy joined him, her presence a calming influence on the Gorn. Together, they began to bridge the communication gap, explaining the nuances of human curiosity and the potential for mutual benefit. The delicate negotiations were interrupted by a commotion at the edge of the landing zone. Krull, flanked by several conservative Gorn, pushed through the crowd. "We demand to speak with the humans," Krull shouted, his scales flaring red. "They must understand the danger of this so-called restoration." Paul felt a headache building as he tried to manage the escalating situation. He turned to Elena, who was watching the scene with a mixture of fascination and concern. "Dr. Rodriguez, perhaps we should move this discussion to a more private location," Paul suggested. Elena nodded, her expression grave. "Agreed. But first, I need to share something with you." She glanced at her scanner, then back at Paul and Ivy. "The symbiotic link between you two. It's causing genetic changes in Paul as well." His DNA is incorporating Gorn sequences. The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembled group. Murmurs rippled through the Gorn, some excited, others fearful. The human team exchanged worried glances. An emergency council session, one of the Gorn leaders announced. We must discuss these developments immediately. As the various factions moved towards a newly activated ancient structure serving as neutral ground, Paul felt the weight of the moment. He looked at Ivy, seeing his own mixture of excitement and apprehension reflected in her eyes. They entered the structure, marveling at the seamless blend of ancient and modern technology. The air crackled with tension as humans, Gorn Council members, and conservative representatives took their places. Paul and Ivy found themselves at the center of attention as the discussions began. Arguments erupted over the implications of their unique biology, the future of human-Gorn relations, and the very nature of Gorn identity. Suddenly, a piercing alarm cut through the heated debate. The structure trembled, and energy conduits along the walls began to pulse erratically. The building's destabilizing. Ivy shouted, her scales flashing with alarm. Paul's mind raced as he realized the gravity of the situation. Trapped in a malfunctioning ancient structure with the leaders of both species, they faced not just personal danger, but a potential diplomatic catastrophe. He looked at Ivy, their link humming with shared commitment. Without a word, they knew what they had to do. As chaos erupted around them, they moved towards the central control panel, ready to put their unique abilities to the ultimate test. As Paul and Ivy approached the central control panel, the building shuddered violently. Energy conduits along the walls pulsed erratically, casting an eerie, flickering light across the chamber. The delegates' voices rose in alarm as the gravity of the situation became apparent. Paul's fingers flew across the holographic interface, his movements guided by a mixture of instinct and the knowledge flowing through a symbiotic link with Ivy. She stood beside him, her scales shifting colors rapidly as she channeled her innate understanding of Gorn technology into their shared consciousness. The system's overloading, Paul muttered, his brow furrowed in concentration. It's like it's trying to process too much at once. Ivy nodded, her eyes scanning the cascading data streams. The structure's adaptive AI is struggling to reconcile the conflicting emotions and intentions in the room. It wasn't designed to handle this level of diversity. As they worked, chaos erupted around them. Dr. Rodriguez tried to calm her team, who huddled together, eyes wide with fear at the alien technology's apparent malfunction. The Gorn High Council members hissed and clicked in agitation, their arguments growing more heated by the second. This is precisely why we should have never allowed humans here. One council member shouted, scales flaring an angry red. Nonsense, another countered. This is an opportunity to learn, to grow beyond our limitations. Amidst the commotion, Crow saw his chance. He slipped away from the arguing factions and made his way to a secondary control panel. With a determined set to his jaw, he began inputting commands, intent on reversing the genetic restoration process that had transformed his people. The moment Crow's fingers touched the panel, a piercing alarm cut through the air. The building trembled more violently, and sections of the floor began to glow with an ominous light. No! Ivy shouted, realizing what was happening. He's triggered a security protocol. Before anyone could react, shimmering walls of energy sprang up throughout the chamber, separating the delegates into smaller groups. Paul found himself cut off from Ivy, the energy barrier between them humming with impossibly strong power. We need to stabilize the core, Ivy called out, her voice muffled by the barrier. But we can't do it separately. Our link is the key. Paul nodded, understanding flowing between them despite the physical separation. We need to form a circuit, he said, glancing around the reconfigured space. There and there. He pointed to two glowing nodes on opposite sides of the chamber. They moved quickly, navigating through the maze of energy walls. As they positioned themselves at the nodes, Paul felt the familiar surge of their symbiotic connection intensifying. He placed his hands on the glowing surface, and across the room, Ivy did the same. The effect was immediate and stunning. Energy flowed through them, creating a visible circuit that pulsed with a harmonious rhythm. The chaotic fluctuations in the building systems began to smooth out, aligning with the coherent field generated by Paul and Ivy's link. The delegates watched in awe as the structure's interior shifted around them. Walls became transparent, revealing intricate energy conduits that realigned themselves into complex, symmetrical patterns. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, replaced by a sense of balance and stability. As the immediate danger passed, the energy barriers dissipated. The chamber reconfigured itself once more, creating a series of interconnected spaces. Each area seemed tailored to address specific points of contention between the humans and Gorn. Dr. Rodriguez, her scientific curiosity overcoming her earlier fear, approached one of the holographic displays that had sprung to life. "Incredible," she breathed, taking in the wealth of data on the genetic restoration process. "The potential here it's beyond anything we could have imagined." The Gorn High Council members, visibly impressed by Paul and Ivy's ability to control their ancient technology, gathered around another display showing the long-term implications of human-Gorn interaction. Crow, however, remained unconvinced. He strode towards Paul and Ivy, who had reunited in the center of the chamber. "What are you?" he demanded, his voice a mixture of fear and anger. "Neither human nor Gorn. How can we trust creatures we don't understand?" Paul opened his mouth to respond, but found himself at a loss for words. The question hit at the heart of the uncertainty he'd been feeling since his transformation began. He looked at Ivy, seeing his own conflicted emotions reflected in her eyes. Before they could formulate a response, the building hummed with renewed energy. The central area of the chamber reconfigured itself, creating a circular space with raised platforms arranged like an amphitheater. It was clear that the AI was providing a forum for this crucial discussion. As the delegates filed into this new space, Paul and Ivy found themselves at the center of attention. The Gorn High Council took positions on one side, while Dr. Rodriguez and her team occupied the other. Crow and his conservative faction filled in the gaps, their postures tense and wary. "Perhaps," Dr. Rodriguez said, breaking the tense silence, "what we're seeing here is not a threat, but an opportunity, a bridge between our species that we never could have anticipated." The chamber hummed with murmurs of agreement and dissent. Paul and Ivy exchanged a glance, knowing that whatever came next would shape the future of human-Gorn relations for generations to come. "Come." Paul took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. "We are neither fully human nor fully Gorn," he began, his voice carrying across the chamber. "But perhaps that's exactly what we need to be right now. A bridge between two worlds, two species that have more in common than they realize." Ivy nodded, her scales shimmering with a mix of blue and green. "Our unique perspective allows us to see the potential in both humans and Gorn. Together, we can achieve far more than we ever could apart." As they spoke, the atmosphere in the chamber shifted. The tension began to dissipate, replaced by a cautious curiosity. Even Crow, despite his earlier outburst, listened intently. Dr. Rodriguez stepped forward, her eyes bright with scientific excitement. "What we're witnessing here is unprecedented. The symbiotic link between Paul and Ivy, the genetic changes, the interaction with Gorn technology, it's opening up possibilities we never imagined." The Gorn High Council conferred briefly, their scales flickering through a range of colors. Finally, one of them addressed the gathered delegates. "It is clear that we stand at a crossroads," the council member announced. "The arrival of humans and the restoration of our genetic heritage have set in motion changes that cannot be undone. We must find a way forward that respects both our traditions and the new realities we face." In the days that followed, intense discussions and negotiations took place. The need for a structured approach to human-Gorn relations became apparent, leading to the establishment of the Interspecies Cooperation Initiative. Paul and Ivy, given their unique status, were appointed as co-chairs. Their first major task came swiftly, overseeing the construction of a dedicated research facility on the outskirts of Xylithia. As they stood on a hill overlooking the chosen site, Paul marveled at how quickly things were moving. "It's hard to believe just a few weeks ago I was just another human scientist," he said, shaking his head in wonder. Ivy placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch sending a warm pulse through their link. "And I was a Gorn struggling to understand my place in a changing world. Now look at us." As they began the planning process for the facility, Paul and Ivy discovered that their symbiotic link had evolved further. They could now share sensory experiences, perceiving the world through each other's eyes. This new ability proved invaluable as they worked on the facility's design. Paul closed his eyes, allowing Ivy's Gorn senses to flood his consciousness. Suddenly, he could perceive subtle variations in temperature and air currents that would be crucial for Gorn comfort. Ivy, in turn, experienced the world through Paul's human perception. She marveled at the way humans process color and depth, insights that helped them create spaces that would be visually appealing to both species. As construction began, Dr. Rodriguez approached them with a proposal. "I'd like to conduct a series of experiments to study your evolving biology," she said, her eyes alight with scientific curiosity. The data could be invaluable for understanding the potential of human-Gorn integration. Paul and Ivy exchanged a glance, their link humming with shared uncertainty. "We understand the scientific value," Paul began carefully, "but we need to consider the ethical implications." Ivy nodded. "Our biology is becoming more complex. We need to ensure that any experiments don't compromise our ability to represent both humans and Gorn effectively." As they grappled with this dilemma, tension began to build in Xylithia. Crow and his conservative faction launched a public campaign against the continued presence of humans on Zorna. They organized protests, their voices echoing through the streets. "The humans are corrupting our culture and our very bodies." Crow shouted at one rally, his scales flaring an angry red. "We must preserve our Gorn identity before it's too late." In response to the growing unrest, the Gorn High Council implemented a planet-wide education program. Paul and Ivy were asked to participate, sharing their experiences as a way to bridge the gap between humans and Gorn. Their first stop on the outreach tour was a manufacturing plant that had been converted to produce technology compatible with restored Gorn biology. As they walked through the facility, explaining the benefits of human-Gorn cooperation, alarms suddenly blared. "The radiation containment system is failing," a Gorn technician shouted, panic evident in his voice. Without hesitation, Paul and Ivy rushed to the central control panel. Their hands moved in perfect synchronization as they interfaced with the plant systems. Through their link, they combined Paul's understanding of human safety protocols with Ivy's innate knowledge of Gorn technology. Energy flowed through them, visible as a pulsing blue light that spread from their hands into the machinery. The alarms fell silent, and the facility's systems realigned themselves. The Gorn workers stared in awe. One of them stepped forward, scales shifting to a respectful gold. "You saved us," he said simply. "Perhaps there is more to this cooperation than we realized." As Paul and Ivy continued their tour of Gorn cities, news of their actions at the plant spread. While they still faced protests organized by Krull supporters, they also encountered growing acceptance and curiosity from many Gorn. Back in Xylithia, the human rescue team faced a difficult decision. Their original mission to retrieve Paul had become impossible given the complexity of the situation on Zorna. After lengthy discussions with Earth's governments, it was decided that they would remain as official ambassadors. This led to the creation of a human district within Xylithia, where human and Gorn architecture blended in a unique fusion. As Paul and Ivy walked through this new enclave, they marveled at the sight of humans and Gorn working side by side to build a shared future. As the ICI research facility neared completion, Paul and Ivy made a startling discovery. During a routine neural scan, Dr. Rodriguez noticed unusual patterns in their brainwaves. It appears that your interaction with the ancient Gorn technology has left traces in your neural pathways, she explained, pointing to the complex data displays. These traces seem to be activating dormant parts of your brains. Before they could fully process this information, an urgent message arrived from a reactivated Gorn outpost on the far side of the planet. The outpost had detected a massive object approaching Zorna, moving at impossible speeds. Paul and Ivy exchanged a look, their link buzzing with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. As they prepared to lead a joint human-Gorn expedition to investigate, they knew that whatever they would find could change everything they thought they knew about their place in the universe. Boarding the newly designed hybrid vessel, capable of interfacing with both human and Gorn systems, Paul took a moment to reflect on how far they had come. As the ship's engines hummed to life, he turned to Ivy, their hands intertwining. "Ready for another adventure?" he asked, a smile playing on his lips. Ivy's scales shimmered with anticipation. "Always," she replied, her voice filled with purpose. As the ship lifted off, carrying them towards the unknown, Paul and Ivy stood united, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Not as human and Gorn, but as something entirely new. New! Not as human and Gorn, but as something entirely unique. The Harmony's sleek hull gleamed in the light of Zorna's twin suns as it lifted off from the launch pad. Paul and Ivy stood at the bridge, their hands intertwined as they watched Xylithia shrink beneath them. The hybrid vessel hummed with energy, its systems responding to their every thought through their symbiotic link. As they ascended through the atmosphere, Paul felt a surge of exhilaration. "It's like the ship is an extension of ourselves," he marveled, his eyes wide with wonder. Ivy nodded, her scales shimmering with excitement. "I can feel every system, every circuit. It's incredible." Their journey to the far side of Zorna was smooth at first, but as they approached the coordinates of the reactivated Gorn outpost, the ship began to shudder. Paul frowned, his astronaut instincts kicking in. "Gravitational anomalies," he muttered, his hands flying over the control panel. "Ivy, can you sense anything?" Ivy closed her eyes, her scales pulsing with concentration. "Yes, I can feel the disturbances. They're like ripples in the fabric of space." Together, they guided the Harmony through the turbulent region. Paul's expertise in space navigation, combined with Ivy's enhanced Gorn senses, allowed them to chart a safe course. The crew watched in awe as the hybrid duo worked in perfect synchronization. As they neared the outpost, a sleek Gorn vessel approached. A voice crackled over the comm system. "Harmony, this is Commander Zara of Outpost Zeta 9. Welcome to the edge of the unknown." The outpost was a marvel of Gorn engineering, its organic architecture seeming to grow out of the asteroid it was anchored to. As they docked, Paul and Ivy felt a strange tingling in their neural pathways, as if the ancient Gorn technology in their brains was responding to something. Commander Zara met them at the airlock, her scales a deep, authoritative purple. "We've been monitoring the object since it appeared on our long-range sensors," she explained as she led them to the control room. "It's like nothing we've ever seen." The main screen displayed a pulsating, moving rapidly toward Zorna. Zara manipulated the controls, and the image zoomed in. Paul and Ivy leaned forward, their eyes widening in unison. "It's decelerating," Paul breathed. Ivy's scales flickered with realization. "That means it's under control. This is no natural phenomenon." Zara nodded grimly. "Exactly. And that's why we need your help. Your unique abilities might be our best chance at understanding what we're dealing with." As the Harmony set course to intercept the object, Paul and Ivy felt the ship's AI evolving, responding to their enhanced neural patterns. The vessel's capabilities expanded, granting them unprecedented control. It's as if the ship is adapting to us, Ivy marveled, her hands dancing over the console. Paul grinned. Well, let's see what this baby can do. As they drew closer to the coordinates, the main view screen flickered to life. What they saw left them speechless. The object was not a single entity, but a massive swarm of smaller units moving in perfect unison. Incredible, Zara whispered, her scales shifting to a pale blue of awe. Suddenly, the swarm began to change shape, the individual units rearranging themselves with breathtaking speed and precision. Within moments, they had formed a colossal, geometrically perfect sphere. It's beautiful, Ivy murmured, her eyes reflecting the mesmerizing sight. Before anyone could respond, a blinding pulse of energy erupted from the sphere. The Harmony systems went dark, plunging the bridge into silence and shadows. In the moments of darkness, something extraordinary happened. Paul and Ivy's symbiotic link intensified, their minds expanding beyond the confines of the ship. They found themselves perceiving the surrounding space without instruments, as if the very fabric of the cosmos was laid bare before them. As the emergency lights flickered on, Paul and Ivy shared a look of amazement. "Did you feel that?" Paul asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Ivy nodded, her scales rippling with a mix of excitement and trepidation. It was like we were one with the universe. Before they could discuss further, the sphere began transmitting a complex series of signals. Zara frowned as she attempted to decode the transmission, her efforts proving futile. "It's unlike any language or code we've encountered," she said, frustration evident in her voice. Paul and Ivy exchanged a glance, their link humming with shared insight. They stepped forward, their hands moving in unison over the console. As they focused on the signal, patterns began to emerge. "It's not just a message," Paul said, his eyes widening with realization. Ivy finished his thought, her scales pulsing with excitement. "It's a key to unlocking something within us," as if triggered by their words. The traces of ancient Gorn technology in their neural pathways began to activate. Paul gasped as a flood of information filled his mind, granting him intuitive understanding of every system on the ship. Beside him, Ivy's connection to Gorn biology deepened, allowing her to sense the life signs of every crew member with startling clarity. "What's happening to you?" Zara asked, her scales shifting to a concerned orange. Before they could answer, a smaller probe launched from the sphere, heading directly towards a Harmony. Zara's hand moved towards the weapon's control, but Paul stopped her. "Wait," he said, his voice filled with certainty. "We need to let it dock." Ivy nodded in agreement. "Whatever this is, it's meant for us. We have to see it through." As the probe connected with the Harmony systems, a vast amount of data began to download. Paul and Ivy interfaced directly with the ship, their enhanced abilities allowing them to process the information at an astonishing rate. What they discovered left them reeling. The data revealed the existence of an ancient, highly advanced species, the Precursors. These beings had seeded life throughout the galaxy, including on Earth and Zorna. The genetic compatibility between humans and Gorn was no coincidence, but part of a grand design. "They were waiting for us," Ivy breathed, her scales shimmering with awe, "waiting for humans and Gorn to make contact." As they absorbed this world-shaking information, the sphere began to retreat, leaving behind a set of coordinates deep in uncharted space. The implications were clear, an invitation to follow, to discover the full legacy of the Precursors. Paul and Ivy stood at a crossroads, the weight of two civilizations resting on their shoulders. The choice to return to Zorna or follow the coordinates loomed large. But before they could decide, an urgent transmission from Xylithia cut through their deliberations. Krull's faction had staged a coup attempt, seizing control of key facilities, including the newly constructed research center. "We need you back here now." Dr. Rodriguez's voice crackled over the comm, tinged with desperation. "You're our only hope of stopping this before it tears apart everything we've built." Paul and Ivy locked eyes, their link buzzing with shared dedication. The fate of two worlds hung in the balance, and the next move was theirs to make. The fate of two worlds hung in the balance, and the next move was theirs to execute. Paul squeezed Ivy's hand, their neural link thrumming with shared perseverance. "We have to go back," he said, his voice steady despite the weight of their decision. Ivy nodded, her scales shifting to a deep blue of purpose. "Agreed. The precursors can wait. Our people need us now." Paul turned to the crew, his eyes reflecting the gravity of the situation. "Set course for Xylithia. Maximum speed. Every second counts." As the Harmony's engines roared to life, Paul and Ivy interfaced directly with the ship systems. Their enhanced abilities allowed them to optimize the vessel's performance, pushing it beyond its normal limits. The journey back to Zorna became a blur of hyperspace and pulsing data streams. Paul's mind raced through the ship's circuitry, fine-tuning every system for peak efficiency. Beside him, Ivy's consciousness expanded, her awareness encompassing every crew member, every fluctuation in the ship's bioelectric field. "We're cutting our return time by 30%, Paul announced, his fingers dancing over the holographic displays. Zara watched in awe as the hybrid duo worked in perfect synchronization. "I've never seen anything like this," she murmured. As they hurtled through space, Paul and Ivy briefed the crew on their precursor discoveries. The implications of their shared origins sent shockwaves through the assembled humans and Gorn. "This changes everything," Zara said, her scales pulsing with a mix of excitement and trepidation. Before they could fully process the revelation, the Harmony dropped out of hyperspace above Zorna. The planet's twin suns cast an eerie glow on the hull as they descended into the atmosphere. Paul's enhanced senses immediately detected the chaos below. "Multiple energy signatures consistent with weapons fire," he reported grimly. "Concentrated around Xylithia." Ivy's scales rippled as she tapped into the ship's sensors. "I'm picking up intense neural activity in the research facility. Hostages, most likely." The Harmony weaved through the sky, dodging bursts of energy fire from Krull's forces. Paul's piloting skills, amplified by his technopathic abilities, allowed them to navigate the gauntlet of defensive fire with breathtaking precision. As they touched down on the outskirts of Xylithia, the ship's ramp had barely lowered before Mira rushed to meet them. Her scales were a mottled pattern of stress and relief. "Thank the ancestors you're here," she said, leading them quickly to a makeshift command center. "Krull staged a full-scale coup. He's taken the research facility and several government buildings." Paul's mind raced, processing the tactical data flooding in through his neural link. What about Dr. Rodriguez and the other scientists? Myra's scales darkened. Hostages. Krull's using them as leverage. Ivy's eyes narrowed, her scales shifting to a steely gray. Not for long. The command center buzzed with activity as Paul and Ivy joined Mira and Zara in formulating a plan. Paul's technopathic abilities allowed him to interface directly with Xylithia's security systems, providing real-time intel on Krull's forces. "We need to move fast," Ivy said, her enhanced senses picking up subtle changes in the city's bioelectric field. "Something's happening to the Gorn population. The stress of the conflict is accelerating the genetic restoration process." Paul nodded, his mind simultaneously processing multiple data streams. "We'll split into two teams. Ivy and I will lead the assault on the research facility. Zara, you and Mira coordinate the Loyalist forces to retake the government buildings." As they geared up for the operation, Paul felt a new level of connection with Ivy. Their neural link hummed with an intensity he'd never experienced before. He glanced at her, seeing his own mix of anticipation and purpose mirrored in her eyes. "Ready?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Ivy's scales shimmered with a fierce willpower. "Always." They moved through the chaotic streets of Xylithia, their enhanced abilities allowing them to anticipate and avoid pockets of resistance. Paul's technopathic skills disabled security systems and communication networks, while Ivy's heightened senses guided them safely past patrols. As they approached the research facility, they encountered a group of Gorn civilians caught in the crossfire. Without hesitation, Paul and Ivy moved to protect them, using their bodies as shields while guiding the civilians to safety. The act did not go unnoticed. Several of Krull's supporters, witnessing the selfless behavior, began to question their allegiance. Murmurs of doubt spread through their ranks. Paul and Ivy pressed on, fighting their way through the facility's defenses. Their neural link reached new heights, allowing them to communicate telepathically and coordinate their actions with unprecedented precision. "The hostages are just ahead," Ivy projected into Paul's mind. "Krull's with them." Paul nodded, his consciousness already reaching out to the lab systems. "Ready when you are." They burst into the central laboratory, finding Krull holding a data crystal over a molecular disintegrator. Dr. Rodriguez and the other scientists huddled in a corner, fear etched on their faces. "Stay back," Krull snarled, his scales a violent red. "One more step, and I destroy everything we've worked for." Paul and Ivy locked eyes, their neural link buzzing with shared purpose. In a fluid motion, Paul reached out with his mind, interfering with the lab's power systems. As the lights flickered, Ivy moved with enhanced speed, closing the distance to Krull. The Gorn leader's eyes widened in shock as Ivy seemed to blur before him. Before he could react, she had disarmed him, the data crystal safely in her grasp. As Loyalist forces secured the facility, Paul and Ivy turned their attention to the hostages. Dr. Rodriguez looked shaken but relieved. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "But we have a new problem. The genetic restoration process. It's accelerating beyond our predictions." Paul and Ivy exchanged a glance, knowing that their greatest challenges still lay ahead. The fate of two species now rested in their hands, and the next steps they took would shape the future of both humans and Gorn. As they prepared to address the Gorn High Council, the weight of their responsibilities settled upon them. The truth about the precursors, the future of human-Gorn relations, and the very course of their species' evolution hung in the balance. Paul took a deep breath, feeling Ivy's presence in his mind, a comforting constant amidst the chaos. Together, they stepped forward, ready to face whatever came next. Paul and Ivy stood before the Gorn High Council, their minds in perfect synchronization as they prepared to share their groundbreaking discoveries. The chamber buzzed with anticipation, the air thick with the gravity of the moment. But before they could begin, chaos erupted. The doors burst open, and a group of Gorn citizens stumbled in, their bodies contorting in ways that defied explanation. Scales merged with patches of human skin, while fingers elongated and shrank in rapid succession. Panic rippled through the council members as they recoiled from the sight. Paul's heightened senses instantly analyzed the situation. He locked eyes with Ivy, their neural link humming with shared purpose. Without a word, they sprang into action. Paul's consciousness expanded, interfacing with the chamber's environmental systems. He adjusted the temperature, humidity, and light levels, creating a cocoon of calm amidst the storm. The subtle changes washed over the room, easing the tension in the air. Meanwhile, Ivy reached out with her empathic abilities, her mind brushing against the distressed Gorn. She projected waves of reassurance, her thoughts weaving through their chaotic emotions like a soothing balm. "Easy now," she said, her voice gentle yet firm. "We're here to help. Let the medical team approach." The transformed Gorn, their eyes wide with fear, slowly relaxed under Ivy's influence. As the panic subsided, Dr. Rodriguez stepped forward, her face a mask of concentration as she scanned the affected individuals with her medical tricorder. "The genetic restoration process is accelerating beyond our models," she reported, her voice tight with concern. "The stress from Kroll's coup attempt seems to have triggered a cascading effect." Paul processed this information, his mind racing through potential scenarios. "We need to act fast," he said, turning to address the Gorn High Council. "This situation could destabilize your entire society if left unchecked." The council members exchanged worried glances, their scales shifting in a kaleidoscope of colors. After a moment of tense deliberation, the head counselor spoke. "We grant you and your team emergency powers to address this crisis," she declared, her voice resonating through the chamber. "Do what you must to stabilize our people." Paul nodded, his mind already formulating a plan. He turned to Ivy and Dr. Rodriguez. "We need a centralized location to coordinate our efforts, somewhere we can interface with ancient Gorn technology." Ivy's eyes lit up. The old temple complex on the outskirts of the city. It's been abandoned for centuries, but its systems might still be operational. Within hours, they had transformed the ancient structure into a makeshift research and treatment center. Paul's technopathic abilities brought long-dormant systems back to life, while Ivy's enhanced senses guided them through the labyrinthine corridors. As they worked to stabilize the affected Gorn, Paul and Ivy's symbiotic link reached new heights. They found themselves perceiving the genetic changes at a molecular level, their shared consciousness delving deep into the building blocks of life. "It's beautiful," Ivy breathed, her scales shimmering with awe as they watched the dance of DNA strands in their mind's eye. The way the human and Gorn genes intertwine. It's like a cosmic ballet. Paul nodded, equally mesmerized. "And look here," he said, highlighting a particular sequence. "This could be the key to stabilizing the transformation process." They relayed their findings to Dr. Rodriguez, guiding her efforts to develop a treatment. Their unique perspective proved invaluable, allowing them to identify subtle patterns that even the most advanced computers had missed. As the day wore on, reports flooded in from across Zorna of similar accelerated transformations. The Gorn High Council, fearing widespread panic, implemented a planet-wide curfew and began controlling the flow of information. Paul frowned as he processed the incoming data. This approach could backfire. People are scared, and keeping them in the dark will only fuel their fears. Ivy nodded, her scales pulsing with grit. "We need to address them directly. Show them that this transformation isn't something to fear, but an opportunity for growth." They presented their plan to the council, a planet-wide broadcast using the ancient Gorn communication network, enhanced by Paul's technopathic abilities. After some hesitation, the council agreed. As they prepared for the broadcast, Paul and Ivy stood before a wall of holographic screens, each showing a different part of Zorna. They took a deep breath, their neural link buzzing with shared purpose. "People of Zorna," Paul began, his voice calm and steady. "We understand your fear and confusion in the face of these rapid changes." Ivy continued seamlessly. "But we stand before you as living proof that human and Gorn can not only coexist, but thrive together." They shared their own experiences of transformation, the challenges they had faced, and the incredible potential they had discovered. As they spoke, their sincerity and openness resonated with the frightened populace. Gradually, the fear and tension that had gripped the planet began to ease. With the immediate crisis stabilizing, Paul and Ivy turned their attention to the long-term implications of their precursor discoveries. They worked closely with Zara, analyzing the data from the Harmony's encounter with the sphere. As they compiled their report for both Gorn and human authorities, a new complication arose. A faction within Gorn society, inspired by the rapid transformations, began advocating for pushing the genetic restoration to its limits. The situation came to a head when a group of young Gorn, led by a charismatic individual named Lyra, staged a demonstration outside the research facility. Their demands for access to the precursor data and voluntary genetic enhancement threatened to reignite the tensions that had led to Krull's coup attempt. Paul and Ivy exchanged a glance, their neural link humming with shared concern. They knew they had to address the situation carefully to prevent further unrest. As they prepared to meet with Lyra and her followers, an urgent message came through from the human rescue team's base camp. Long-range sensors had detected multiple objects entering the Zornan star system, following a trajectory similar to the precursor sphere. Paul's mind raced as he processed this new information. He turned to Ivy, his expression a mix of excitement and apprehension. "It seems our adventure is a long way to go," he said, his voice low. Ivy nodded, her scales shimmering with anticipation. "Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." With that, they stepped out to meet Lyra and her followers, knowing that their actions in the coming hours would shape the future of both human and Gorn civilizations. The next chapter of their interstellar journey was about to begin, filled with challenges and possibilities beyond their wildest imagination. Dreams. The weight of their responsibilities settled upon them as they prepared to face the challenges ahead. As Paul and Ivy made their way to meet Lyra and her followers, an urgent message from Dr. Rodriguez interrupted their thoughts. Paul's technopathic abilities instantly relayed the information to Ivy through their neural link. "The genetic changes," Paul said, his voice tight with concern. "They're accelerating beyond anything we've seen before." Ivy's scales rippled with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "How bad is it?" "Some Gorn are developing abilities that blur the line between our species," Paul explained as they quickened their pace. "We need to handle this carefully." They arrived at the public square, a neutral ground chosen for the meeting. Human and Gorn security forces stood at attention, their presence a silent reminder of the delicate balance they sought to maintain. As Lyra and her group approached, Paul and Ivy couldn't help but stare at the striking blend of human and Gorn features displayed by the protesters. Lyra stepped forward, her eyes a mesmerizing swirl of reptilian and human characteristics. "We demand access to the precursor data," she announced, her voice carrying across the square, "and the right to voluntarily enhance our genetic potential." Paul and Ivy exchanged a glance, their empathic abilities working in tandem to gauge the emotions swirling around them. They sensed a complex tapestry of fear, hope, and persistence from Lyra's followers. "We understand your concerns," Ivy began, her voice calm and measured. "But we need to proceed with caution. The changes happening to our people are dash." Her words were cut short as Paul suddenly stiffened beside her. His eyes glazed over, his consciousness expanding into the ancient Gorn structures surrounding the square. "Ivy," he whispered, his voice filled with awe. "The buildings. They're reacting to the altered Gorn biology." Before anyone could respond, a massive holographic projection burst to life above them. The star map hovered in the air, visible to all of Xylithia, with a specific sector highlighted. Paul and Ivy recognized the coordinates instantly, the location indicated by the precursor sphere. The crowd erupted into a cacophony of shouts and exclamations. Some pointed to the map with reverence, while others recoiled in fear. Lyra's eyes widened, her scales shimmering with excitement. "This is a sign," she exclaimed. "We must follow where it leads." Paul raised his hands, projecting a sense of calm through his enhanced abilities. "Everyone, please," he called out. "We need to approach this rationally." Ivy stepped forward, her mind racing with possibilities. "We propose a joint expedition," she announced, her voice carrying over the din. "Representatives from all factions, including Lyra's group and the conservative Gorn. Together, we'll seek answers about the precursors and the purpose behind these changes." The proposal sent a ripple through the crowd. Paul could sense the shift in emotions, fear giving way to curiosity, suspicion melting into cautious optimism. As discussions began in earnest, Paul felt a strange tingling sensation along his skin. He glanced down to see subtle scales forming along his forearms. Beside him, Ivy's features seemed to soften, becoming more human-like by the moment. Their eyes met, a mixture of fascination and concern passing between them. They knew their evolving biology would be both an asset and a challenge in the days to come. In the following hours, the Gorn High Council convened an emergency session. They emerged with a declaration supporting the expedition, seeing it as an opportunity to unite their fractured society. As preparations for the journey began, Paul and Ivy found themselves at the center of a whirlwind of activity. The Harmony underwent extensive modifications, its systems upgraded with precursor-inspired technology. Dr. Rodriguez assembled a diverse team of human and Gorn scientists, each chosen for their expertise and adaptability. Throughout it all, long-range sensors continued to track the approaching objects. As they entered the Zornan system, the objects revealed themselves to be a swarm of small unmanned probes. They dispersed throughout the system, scanning planets and moons with unknown purpose. The Gorn military monitored the probes' movements with growing unease. Defense systems were primed, ready to respond to any potential threat. Yet, as the probes continued their seemingly benign survey of the system, a cautious optimism began to take hold. On the eve of the expedition's launch, Paul and Ivy stood in the Harmony's control center. The ship hummed with energy, its hybrid systems a testament to the potential of human and Gorn cooperation. "Are you ready for this?" Paul asked, his hand brushing against Ivy's scales. She turned to him, her eyes reflecting the stars visible through the view screen. "As ready as we'll ever be," she replied, her voice filled with tenacity. As the launch sequence initiated, Paul and Ivy's minds merged through their neural link. They felt the presence of the crew behind them, human and Gorn working in harmony, united in purpose. The Harmony lifted off, its engines pulsing with precursor energy. As they broke free of Zorna's atmosphere, the vastness of space opened up before them. Somewhere out there lay answers to the questions that had brought them to this moment. Paul and Ivy shared a final look before focusing on the task ahead. The next phase of their journey was about to begin, and with it, the potential to reshape the future of both their species. As the Harmony's engines hummed with anticipation, Paul and Ivy shared a final determined look before focusing on the launch sequence. Suddenly, the ship's systems flared with unexpected energy. Alarms blared as displays flickered and controls became unresponsive. Paul's eyes widened as he sensed the source of the disturbance. "The precursor probes!" he shouted, his hands flying over the control panel. "They're emitting some kind of energy field." Ivy's scales rippled with concentration as she joined Paul in battling the surge. Their neural link buzzed with shared purpose as they worked in perfect synchronization, their enhanced abilities allowing them to interface with the ship's hybrid technology on a deeper level than ever before. As Paul's consciousness merged with the Harmony's core systems, he felt a strange resonance between the ship's technology and his own evolving biology. Beside him, Ivy experienced a similar sensation, her Gorn physiology adapting to the interface in ways she never thought possible. "We're stabilizing," Ivy announced, her voice tight with effort. "But our trajectory is off." Through the view screen, they watched as Zorna receded. But instead of heading towards open space, the Harmony veered towards one of the planet's moons. Paul's mind raced as he processed the data flooding through the ship's sensors. "There's something on that moon," he said, his voice filled with awe. "Artificial structures hidden beneath the surface." Dr. Rodriguez stepped forward, her eyes gleaming with curiosity. "A precursor outpost? We should investigate before proceeding to the original coordinates." Paul nodded, making a split-second decision. "Agreed. Ivy, adjust our course. We're landing on that moon." As the Harmony touched down near a massive, partially exposed dome, The expedition team prepared for their first extraterrestrial exploration. Paul and Ivy led the group, their hybrid physiology buzzing with anticipation as they approached the structure. They discovered an entrance mechanism, its design unlike anything they had encountered before. As Paul reached out to examine it, the mechanism pulsed with energy, responding to his touch. Beside him, Ivy placed her hand on the surface, and the entrance spiraled open, granting them access. Inside, the team found themselves in a vast complex filled with technology beyond their wildest imaginations. Dr. Rodriguez immediately gravitated towards a series of liquid-filled chambers. Her scientific curiosity piqued. These appear to be designed for biological experimentation, she mused, running her scanner over the nearest chamber. The complexity is astounding. While the doctor worked, Lyra and her followers discovered a hall filled with holographic displays. As they activated, the screens came to life, showing vivid depictions of human and Gorn evolutionary history. "Look at this," Lyra called out, her eyes wide with wonder. "It's like watching our entire species journey in fast forward." As the team delved deeper into the facility, they encountered increasingly sophisticated security measures. Paul's technopathic abilities allowed him to bypass most of them, but they soon faced a barrier that refused to yield. "This one's different," Paul grunted, his mind straining against the powerful security protocols. "I can't break through." Ivy stepped forward, her muscles tensing as she assessed the physical structure of the barrier. "Let me try something," she said, her voice low with concentration. Drawing on her enhanced Gorn strength, Ivy gripped the edges of the barrier's housing. With a sound of straining metal, she managed to physically override the mechanism, creating an opening for the team to pass through. In the central chamber, they found a dormant AI system unlike anything they had ever seen. Paul and Ivy exchanged a look, then simultaneously reached out to interface with the alien technology. As their combined abilities activated the system, a holographic figure materialized before them. "Welcome, children of our creation," the AI intoned, its voice resonating with ancient wisdom. "You have reached a critical juncture in your development." The AI proceeded to explain the true purpose of the facility, a monitoring station designed to observe the genetic development of both humans and Gorn. It confirmed that the changes occurring in Gorn society were part of a predetermined evolutionary path set in motion eons ago. But as the team absorbed this revelation, the AI's tone grew grave. "A threat approaches," it warned. "The same danger that forced us to retreat long ago. The probes you have encountered are part of our automated defense network, activated by the recent changes in Gorn biology. They prepare for our return, but the enemy may not be far behind." Before anyone could respond, the facility hummed to life around them. Holographic displays activated, showing a galaxy map dotted with the locations of other precursor outposts. "These sanctuaries contain knowledge and technology crucial for the trials ahead," the AI explained. "You must seek them out if you hope to face what comes." Suddenly, an urgent communication from Zorna broke through the awed silence. The remaining precursor probes had begun terraforming several uninhabited planets and moons in the system, causing gravitational disturbances that threatened Zorna's stability. Paul and Ivy exchanged a troubled look, the weight of their responsibility settling heavily upon them. They faced an impossible choice: return to Zorna to manage the immediate crisis, or continue their mission to uncover the knowledge needed to save both their species. As tensions rose among the team, Lyra stepped forward with a proposal. "We should split our forces," she suggested. "I can lead a team back to Zorna with Dr. Rodriguez to address the immediate threat, while you two continue to the precursor coordinates." Paul and Ivy considered the suggestion, their neural link buzzing with shared thoughts and emotions. It seemed like a logical compromise, but separating the two most advanced human-Gorn hybrids carried its own risks. As they deliberated, the precursor AI offered one final, cryptic warning. "The The key to survival lies in unity, but beware the cost of becoming one. Paul took a deep breath, his gaze meeting Ivy's. In that moment, they both knew the decision they had to make would test not only the strength of their bond, but the very future of their species. With the fate of two civilizations hanging in the balance, they prepared to embark on the next phase of their journey, acutely aware that every choice from this point forward would shape the destiny of humans and Gorn alike. Alike for humans and Gorn. The weight of their responsibility pressed heavily upon them as they considered their options. Paul turned to Ivy, his voice low but resolute. We need to split our forces. It's the only way to address both crises simultaneously. Ivy nodded, her features a blend of human and Gorn characteristics. Agreed. Lyra's suggestion makes sense. She and Dr. Rodriguez can handle the immediate threat on Zorna while we continue to the precursor coordinates. They shared their decision with the team, and preparations began immediately. As Lyra and Dr. Rodriguez readied their group for the return journey, Paul and Ivy worked to integrate the newly discovered precursor technology into the Harmony systems. The process was challenging but exhilarating. Paul's technopathic abilities allowed him to interface with the alien tech on a level that would have been impossible just days ago. Ivy's enhanced spatial awareness and strength proved invaluable as they physically modified the ship's components. As they worked, Paul noticed the scale-like patches spreading across his skin. He caught Ivy's eye, noting the increasingly human-like contours of her face. Their shared glance spoke volumes about their mutual transformation. With final farewells exchanged, Lyra's team departed for Zorna. The Harmony, now a hybrid of human, Gorn, and precursor technology, prepared for its journey into the unknown. As they left the moon's orbit, Paul felt the ship respond to his thoughts with unprecedented precision. The engines hummed with new power, propelling them through space at speeds that defied their original estimates. This is incredible, Ivy breathed, her hands dancing over the control panel. We've cut our projected travel time by more than half. Their elation was short-lived. As they entered a region of space marked on the precursor maps, alarms blared. The view screen filled with swirling patterns of energy, spatial anomalies that threatened to tear the ship apart. Paul's mind merged with the Harmony systems. He felt the danger as if it were attacking his own body. With a thought, he redirected power to the shields, creating a protective bubble around the ship. "Ivy, I need you," he called out, sweat beading on his brow. She was there in an instant, her consciousness joining his in the ship's network. Together, they navigated the treacherous space, making split-second adjustments to their course. The crew watched in awe as the human-Gorn hybrid pair guided them safely through the spatial minefield. When they emerged on the other side, a cheer went up from the control room. Their celebration was cut short as a massive structure came into view. Hidden within a dense asteroid field was a space station of staggering proportions, its design unmistakably precursor in origin. "This must be it," Paul said, his voice filled with wonder. "The coordinates lead us here." Ivy's eyes narrowed as she assessed the asteroid field. "It's too dense for normal navigation. We'll have to do this manually." Paul nodded, understanding her meaning. Once again, they joined their minds with the ship systems. Paul guided the Harmony through the field, relying on Ivy's enhanced spatial awareness to predict the asteroid's movements and find safe passages. As they approached the station, they encountered a shimmering energy barrier. Paul and Ivy exchanged a glance, both recognizing the challenge before them. "We need to create a resonance frequency," Paul said, his fingers flying over the controls. Ivy joined him, their movements in perfect sync. "If we modulate our shields to match the barrier's frequency, we can pass through unharmed," Paul finished. They worked in tandem, their hybrid biology allowing them to process complex calculations at incredible speed. The Harmony systems responded to their commands, adjusting the shield frequency in precise increments. As they approached the barrier, the ship shuddered. For a heart-stopping moment, it seemed they had miscalculated. Then, with a flash of light, they passed through, the barrier rippling around them like water. They docked with the station, the airlock forming a secure seal. Paul and Ivy led the team into the vast structure, their senses on high alert. The interior of the station was a marvel of advanced technology. Corridors stretched out in all directions, lined with pulsing lights and strange, organic-looking consoles. They soon discovered chambers filled with stasis pods. Paul approached one, his hand hovering over its surface. Inside, he could make out the features of a being that looked like a primitive version of himself, an early human. "Look," Ivy called from nearby. "This one contains a Gorn ancestor." The implications were staggering. This station was more than a simple outpost. It was a repository of their species' entire evolutionary history. As they explored further, they came upon the central control room. A massive holographic display dominated the center, currently dark and inactive. Paul and Ivy approached the main console, their hybrid physiology tingling with anticipation. As they placed their hands on the surface, the system sprang to life, recognizing their unique genetic signature. The holographic display flickered and expanded, filling the room with a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Points of light indicated other nexus points scattered throughout space. A flood of information poured into their minds. The station's database opened before them, revealing the true purpose of the Precursor's grand design. "They were preparing us," Paul said, his voice filled with awe, "guiding our evolution. To face a threat they couldn't defeat," Ivy finished, her eyes wide as she absorbed the information. "The Devourers, a species so powerful and hostile that they forced the mighty Precursors into hiding. A threat that now loomed on the horizon, threatening everything they held dear." As they delved deeper into the database, they discovered information about their own ongoing transformations. The potential to accelerate and control their genetic modifications was within their grasp. But with that knowledge came a chilling warning. Pushing their transformation too far could result in the loss of their individual identities, merging them into a single consciousness. Paul and Ivy stood before the console, the weight of this new information bearing down on them. The power to potentially save their species was at their fingertips, but at what cost? Before they could fully process this revelation, an urgent transmission cut through their contemplation. Lyra's voice, filled with barely suppressed panic, echoed through the control room. "Paul, Ivy, we need you back on Zorna immediately. The terraforming is out of control. We've stabilized some areas, but the planet's geological stability is critical. We can't do this without you." The holographic display shifted, showing the chaos unfolding on their homeworld. Massive geological shifts threatened to tear the planet apart. Paul and Ivy exchanged a look, the magnitude of their decision clear in their eyes. Stay and uncover more about the cosmic threat looming on the horizon, or return to save their home and people from imminent destruction. As they grappled with this impossible choice, the station systems hummed with new activity. The galactic map expanded, revealing dozens of points of light they hadn't noticed before. "Are those?" Ivy began, her voice trailing off in disbelief. "Other human and Gorn colonies," Paul confirmed, his pupils dilating at the implications. Their species had spread further among the stars than they had ever imagined. This new information added yet another layer to their already complex decision. Paul turned to Ivy, his eyes reflecting the swirling galactic map. "Whatever we decide," he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil within, "it affects more than just Zorna now." Ivy nodded, her gaze fixed on the urgent message from their homeworld. "We have the power to save our planet," she said. "But at what cost to our future?" The control room fell silent as the hybrid pair stood at the crossroads of their species' destiny. The fate of Zorna, The mysterious colonies, and the looming threat of the Devourers all hung in the balance. With time running out, Paul and Ivy prepared to make a decision that would alter the course of history for humans and Gorn alike. Paul and Ivy shared a long, meaningful look. The weight of their decision pressed upon them, but they knew what had to be done. "We need to split our efforts," Paul said, his voice resolute. "I'll stay here with a small team to continue investigating the Precursor database and the Devourer threat. You should return to Zorna and help stabilize the situation there." Ivy nodded, her features a perfect blend of human and Gorn. "Agreed. My connection to Gorn physiology might give us an edge in dealing with the terraforming crisis." As they prepared for their separation, Paul and Ivy found themselves drawn to each other. Their hybrid bodies resonated on a level beyond physical touch, creating an intimacy that transcended their individual species. They embraced, their scaled skin shimmering where it met. "Be careful," Paul whispered, his breath warm against Ivy's ear. "You too," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. "Don't lose yourself in all that Precursor data." They parted reluctantly, and Ivy boarded a shuttle newly outfitted with Precursor tech. The ship hummed with energy as it departed, quickly becoming a speck in the vastness of space. Paul turned his attention back to the Nexus Point's control room, his mind already racing with the possibilities hidden within the Precursor database. He placed his hands on the console, feeling the familiar tingle as his consciousness merged with the ancient systems. Information flooded his awareness. He saw a network of dormant Precursor facilities spread across known human and Gorn colonies. These installations held the potential to stabilize the genetic modifications occurring in both species and provide a defense against the Devourers. As Paul delved deeper, he uncovered references to a Precursor artifact called the Harmonic Resonator. Its capabilities were staggering: the power to synchronize Precursor technologies across vast distances. Paul's heart raced as he realized the implications. This could be the key to controlling the terraforming probes on Zorna and throughout the galaxy. But the resonator's location was heavily encrypted. Paul's brow furrowed as he attempted to decipher the complex code. It would require a unique combination of human ingenuity and Gorn intuition to crack. As he worked, Paul became aware of changes in his body. His skin took on a reflective quality, reminiscent of Gorn scales. His thought processes accelerated, allowing him to parse the vast amounts of Precursor data with increasing speed. Meanwhile, Ivy's shuttle streaked through space, the Precursor enhancements propelling it at unprecedented velocities. She arrived at Zorna to find a world in chaos. Massive earthquakes shook the planet's crust. Volcanoes that had lain dormant for millennia now spewed ash and lava into the atmosphere. Storms of terrifying intensity lashed the coasts, while inland, drought parched once fertile lands. Ivy made her way to Xylithia, the capital city, where Lyra and Dr. Rodriguez had established a crisis management center. The city was barely holding back the rising floodwaters caused by rapid polar ice melt. "Thank the ancestors you're here," Lyra said as Ivy entered the command center. "We're barely keeping up with the geological shifts." Ivy nodded grimly. "I need to interface with the ancient Gorn technology. There might be a way to stabilize the planet systems." Using her enhanced abilities, Ivy connected with a network of Gorn structures scattered across Zorna. As her consciousness expanded through the system, she made a startling discovery. These ancient installations were designed to work in tandem with the Precursor probes, but the accelerated activation had thrown everything into disarray. Ivy's exploration led her to a hidden Precursor installation beneath Xylithia. As she entered the facility, her body underwent a sudden, intense transformation. Her Gorn features became more pronounced, her skin taking on a deeper, more vibrant hue. At the same time, her human characteristics adapted, creating a perfect synthesis of both species. With this change came a heightened awareness of Zorna itself. Ivy could sense the planet's geological stress points, feeling the tremors and shifts as if they were occurring within her own body. She approached the central console of the installation, her newly transformed hands splaying across its surface. The system sprang to life, responding to her hybrid touch. Ivy closed her eyes, focusing her mind on the task at hand. Through sheer force of will, she began to counteract the more destructive effects of the terraforming process. She redirected lava flows, calmed storm systems, and stabilized tectonic plates. It was exhausting work, but slowly, a measure of equilibrium returned to Zorna's environment. As news of Ivy's actions spread, she became a figure of both reverence and controversy among the Gorn population. Many saw her as a savior, the embodiment of a new future for their species. Others, particularly those aligned with Krull's conservative faction, viewed her with suspicion and fear. The Gorn High Council, recognizing the critical nature of the situation, granted Ivy emergency powers to coordinate the planet-wide response to the crisis. This decision sent shockwaves through Gorn society, effectively placing a human-Gorn hybrid in a position of unprecedented authority. Back at the Nexus Point, Paul's research yielded a chilling revelation about the nature of the Devourers. They were not a single species, but a collective of assimilated civilizations, merged into a hive mind by an ancient, malevolent intelligence. As this disturbing truth sank in, Paul finally managed to decrypt the location of the harmonic resonator. His eyes widened in shock as the coordinates appeared on the holographic display. "It can't be," he whispered. The resonator was on Earth. Humanity's ancestral home held a deeper connection to the precursors than anyone had ever imagined. Paul stared at the galactic map, his mind racing. He had to find a way to reach Earth and secure the resonator before the Devourer threat arrived. But how could he leave the Nexus Point with so much left to discover? As he grappled with this dilemma, Paul became acutely aware of how much he had changed. His reflection in a nearby console showed a face that was neither fully human nor Gorn, but something new and unprecedented. The vast distance between him and Ivy seemed to stretch impossibly wide. He reached out with his mind, hoping to feel some echo of their connection across the stars. But all he felt was the cold emptiness of space, and the weight of the monumental task that lay ahead. Ahead, the fate of not just their homeworld, but potentially all of humanity and the Gorn, rested on their next move. Paul's fingers flew across the console, his hybrid mind processing the information at an unprecedented speed. As he decrypted the final piece of data, his eyes widened. "Earth," he breathed, barely able to contain his shock. "The harmonic resonator is on Earth." The revelation sent a jolt through his system. Earth, humanity's cradle, held a key to their survival that no one had ever suspected. Paul's mind raced with the implications, but he knew there was no time to waste. He turned to the small team of researchers who had remained with him at the Nexus Point. "Prepare for departure," he ordered, his voice carrying a new authority. "We're going to Earth." As the team scrambled to ready their ship, Paul established a secure communication link with Zorna. Ivy's face appeared on the holographic display, her features a perfect blend of human and Gorn, mirroring his own transformation. "Ivy," he said, his voice tight with urgency, "we've located the harmonic resonator. It's on Earth. I'm leading a team there now." Ivy's eyes widened, her bioluminescent skin pulsing with surprise. "Earth? But how dash?" "No time to explain," Paul interrupted. "We need to retrieve it before the Devourers arrive. How are things on Zorna?" Ivy's expression grew grim. "We're managing, but barely. The planet's going through massive changes." "I'm changing too." She hesitated, then added, "The Gorn High Council has proposed something radical, a bonding ritual that would connect me directly to Zorna's core." Paul felt a pang of concern. "Is it safe?" "Don't know," Ivy admitted, "but it might be our only chance to stabilize the planet. I'll have to decide soon." Paul nodded. feeling the weight of their separate but equally crucial missions. "We'll stay in touch. Be careful, Ivy." "You too, Paul," she replied, her eyes conveying everything words couldn't. The communication ended, and Paul boarded the ship with his team. The vessel, enhanced with precursor technology, hummed with power as it launched into space. As they accelerated to speeds beyond anything humanity had achieved before, Paul felt the changes in his body intensify. His skin took on a metallic sheen, and he could sense the ship's systems as if they were extensions of his own nervous system. Days passed in the blink of an eye, and soon Earth loomed before them. Paul's heart raced at the sight of humanity's homeworld, a blue marble suspended in the void. Using their advanced stealth capabilities, they bypassed Earth's defense systems and entered the atmosphere undetected. Their destination was a dense jungle, the location of an ancient archaeological site that held the harmonic resonator. As they approached, Paul's enhanced senses detected movement on the ground. "We're not alone," he warned his team as they landed. "Stay alert." They emerged from the ship, the humid air of the jungle hitting them like a wall. Paul's hybrid skin adapted instantly, regulating his body temperature. They moved through the lush vegetation, following the signal of the resonator. Suddenly, figures emerged from the underbrush, weapons trained on Paul and his team. These weren't local militia or government forces. Their gear was too advanced, their movements too coordinated. "Stop right there," a voice commanded. "This area is restricted." Paul raised his hand slowly, his mind racing. He focused on the leader of the group, reaching out with his newfound telepathic abilities. "We're not here to harm you," he projected. "We're here to save humanity." The guard's eyes widened in shock, his weapon wavering. What are you?" he stammered. Paul took a step forward, his skin shimmering in the dappled sunlight filtering through the canopy. "I'm human," he said aloud, "but also something more. We're here for the harmonic resonator. The fate of our species depends on it." The guards exchanged uneasy glances. Their leader, still visibly shaken by the telepathic contact, lowered his weapon slightly. "How do you know about the resonator?" he demanded. "We're from a colony world," Paul explained, choosing his words carefully. "We've discovered things about our past, about the precursors who came before us. There's a threat coming, and we need the resonator to have any hope of surviving it." The tension in the air was palpable as the guards considered Paul's words. Finally, the leader nodded. "Follow us," he said. "But know that if you make one wrong move, we won't hesitate to take you down." As they moved deeper into the jungle, Paul's mind raced. They were so close to the resonator, but convincing these guardians to hand it over would be no easy task. And all the while, the clock was ticking. The devourers were coming, and Earth, Zorna, and countless other worlds hung in the balance. The dense foliage gave way to an ancient stone structure, its weathered surface covered in vines and moss. Paul felt a resonance within his hybrid body, a pull toward something ancient and powerful hidden within. As they approached the entrance, he knew they were on the cusp of changing the course of history for both humans and Gorn alike. As Paul and his team stood before the ancient structure, the air thick with anticipation, their communicators suddenly crackled to life. A urgent transmission from Zorna broke through the tension, its message sending a jolt of excitement through the group. "Paul, we've made a critical discovery." Ivy's voice came through, tinged with both excitement and urgency. "The stabilization efforts have revealed a hidden precursor installation beneath Zorna's surface. We need you here immediately." Paul's eyes widened, his hybrid mind quickly processing the implications. He turned to the Earth guards, who had been listening intently. "The situation has changed," he said, his voice carrying a new weight of authority. "We need to secure the harmonic resonator now and return to Zorna. The fate of both our worlds may depend on it." The guard captain hesitated for a moment, then nodded sharply. "Follow me," he said, leading them into the structure. Within minutes, they emerged with a harmonic resonator, a device that pulsed with an otherworldly energy. Paul could feel its power resonating with his hybrid physiology, hinting at capabilities yet to be unlocked. As they boarded their ship, Paul's fingers danced across the console, plotting the fastest course back to Zorna. The precursor-enhanced engines hummed to life, propelling them into space at speeds that defied conventional physics. During the journey, Paul immersed himself in studying the resonator. His hybrid senses allowed him to interface with the device on a level that would have been impossible for a pure human or Gorn. As he delved deeper, he made a startling discovery. "The resonator," he announced to his team, his voice filled with awe, "it's not just a key to controlling the terraforming probes. It can amplify and direct our hybrid abilities. This could be the weapon we need against the Devourers." The ship dropped out of its faster-than-light travel, Zorna looming large in the view screen. As they entered the atmosphere, Paul's enhanced vision spotted a gathering near a massive excavation site. They touched down, and Paul's breath caught in his throat as he saw Ivy. Her transformation had progressed significantly since their last communication. Her skin shimmered with intricate bioluminescent patterns, her features a harmonious blend of human and Gorn that radiated an otherworldly beauty. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the rest of the world faded away. Paul could feel a resonance between them, their hybrid physiologies recognizing each other on a fundamental level. Ivy broke the silence, her voice carrying a new depth of power. "We need to move quickly. The installation is unlike anything we've seen before." They descended into the earth, the passage illuminated by the soft glow emanating from Ivy's skin. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber filled with technology that defied comprehension. Stasis pods, similar to those at the nexus point, lined the walls. At the center of the chamber stood a holographic projection system of staggering complexity. Paul approached it, his technopathic abilities instinctively reaching out to interface with the alien technology. The system sprang to life, projecting a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Countless points of light represented human and Gorn colonies, but a wave of darkness approached from the outer rim, the Devourer fleet. As they studied the map, Paul's hybrid mind made connections at lightning speed. "These points," he said, indicating a series of locations scattered throughout the galaxy, "they're defense platforms. The precursors built a network to protect against threats like the Devourers." Ivy's eyes widened with realization. "And we're the key to activating it. Our hybrid nature, it's what the precursors were working towards all along." Before they could discuss further, an alarm blared from their communication devices. Zorna's long-range sensors had detected the first wave of the Devourer fleet entering the system. Paul and Ivy exchanged a look, understanding passing between them without words. They stepped towards two pod-like structures that had begun to glow in response to their presence. "This will push our hybrid nature to its limits," Paul said, his voice tight with tension. "We don't know what will become." Ivy nodded, her expression resolute. "We don't have a choice. For Zorna, for Earth, for all our people, we have to try." They entered the pods, and energy fields enveloped them. Paul felt his body changing, adapting, evolving at an unprecedented rate. New neural pathways formed, allowing his mind to expand beyond the confines of his physical form. As the process neared its completion, Paul could sense Ivy's presence more strongly than ever before. Their minds touched across the divide between the pods, sharing the experience of their final transformation. The energy fields dissipated, and Paul and Ivy emerged. Their bodies glowed with internal energy, their features a perfect synthesis of human and Gorn. They moved with a fluid grace that spoke of the profound changes they had undergone. Without hesitation, they approached the central control panel. As their hands touched the surface, they felt a connection to the vast precursor network spanning the galaxy. Through the harmonic resonator, Their abilities were amplified 1,000-fold. Paul and Ivy began the process of activating the defense platforms, their expanded minds coordinating complex systems across unimaginable distances. Energy barriers sprang to life, creating a web that began to slow the Devourer fleet's advance. But the strain was immense. Paul could feel the pressure building in his mind, the effort of maintaining the network threatening to overwhelm him. He glanced at Ivy, seeing the same struggle reflected in her eyes. They realized in that moment that fully activating and maintaining the defense network would require a deeper connection, a merging of their consciousnesses with the precursor system itself. As the first Devourer ships entered Zorna's solar system, Paul and Ivy stood at the precipice of this monumental decision. The fate of two species hung in the balance. Their individual identities weighed against the survival of billions. Paul reached out, taking Ivy's hand in his. Their eyes met, a universe of unspoken communication passing between them in an instant. Together, they turned towards the pulsing heart of the precursor installation, ready to take the final step into the unknown. Unknown, as they stepped forward, hands clasped tightly, a blinding flash erupted from the precursor installation. The room shook violently, throwing Paul and Ivy off balance. "What's happening?" Ivy shouted over the deafening roar. Paul's hybrid senses worked overtime, interfacing with the alien technology around them. The Devourers, their energy weapons, are interfering with the system. Another tremor rocked the chamber, and sparks flew from the control panel. The connection to the defense network flickered and died, leaving them cut off from the galaxy-wide system they had worked so hard to activate. "No!" Paul banged his head against the now-dark console. "We were so close." Ivy grabbed his arm, pulling him away from the failing equipment. "We need to get out of here. Now!" They raced through the collapsing structure, their enhanced reflexes allowing them to dodge falling debris. As they emerged into the open air, they saw the sky ablaze with energy weapons fire. Devourer ships pierced Zorna's atmosphere, their ominous forms descending upon the planet's cities. Paul's mind raced, processing the dire situation. The defense platforms are only partially activated. We need a new plan. Ivy's eyes lit up with sudden inspiration. The harmonic resonator. We can use it to boost Zorna's communication array. If we can reach out to other colonies, we might still have a chance. Without hesitation, they sprinted towards the precursor ship where they had left the resonator. Paul's fingers flew over the device, reprogramming it on the run. "I'll connect this to the main array," he said. "Can you stabilize the planet's energy grid? We'll need all the power we can get." Ivy nodded, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing with purpose. "I'm on it." As Paul worked on the resonator, Ivy reached out with her hybrid abilities, connecting to Zorna's core. She felt the planet's energy surging through her, wild and chaotic. With careful mental adjustments, she began to stabilize the flow, channeling it where it was needed most. The sky lit up as massive energy weapons fired from hidden silos across Zorna's surface. Several Devourer ships exploded in brilliant fireballs, but more took their place, pushing through the initial defenses. Paul finished his modifications and connected the harmonic resonator to Zorna's communication array. The device hummed to life, its energy amplifying the signal to unprecedented levels. "It's working," Paul exclaimed. "We're reaching colonies across the galaxy, sending data on the defense platforms now." As information flowed through the network, Paul and Ivy coordinated the activation efforts across multiple star systems. Slowly but surely, more defense platforms came online, creating a web of resistance against the Devourer advance. Their moment of triumph was short-lived as the ground shook beneath their feet. In the distance, they saw Devourer troops landing on the outskirts of Xylithia. "We need to coordinate the ground defense," Ivy said, her voice tight with urgency. They rushed to a nearby command center, their hybrid abilities allowing them to interface directly with Zorna's defense systems. Paul directed Gorn military forces to strategic locations, while Ivy guided human reinforcements arriving from off-world. Through their enhanced senses, they could almost see the battle unfolding like a three-dimensional chess game. They predicted Devourer tactics and countered them, buying precious time for the defenders. Suddenly, a transmission from Earth broke through. Paul's eyes widened as he processed the information. "The secret society on Earth," he said, turning to Ivy. "They've activated hidden precursor defenses. An energy shield is repelling Devourer forces in the Sol system." Ivy's face lit up with hope. "That's forcing them to divert resources. We might have a chance after all." Seizing the opportunity, Ivy reached out to Zorna's core once more. Ancient tunnels, part of the precursor design, lit up in her mind's eye. "Paul, look at this," she said, projecting the image to him. "We can use these passages to outflank the Devourers." As they coordinated the new strategy, Paul's hybrid senses picked up an anomaly in the harmonic resonator's energy signature. He focused on it, his mind interfacing with the device on a deeper level. "Ivy," he said, his voice filled with excitement and trepidation, "I think I've found a way to disrupt the Devourer's hive mind. If we can broadcast a signal using the resonator, we might be able to sever the link between their ships and ground forces." Ivy's eyes met his, understanding the implication immediately. "But to broadcast that signal, we'd need to be at the heart of their landing zone." Paul nodded grimly. "It's a one-way trip. We might not make it back." For a moment, they stood in silence, the weight of the decision heavy upon them. Then, without a word, they began gathering the equipment they would need. As they emerged from the command center, they found Lyra waiting for them, flanked by a team of hybrid warriors. "We heard your plan," Lyra said, her hybrid features set in drive. "We're coming with you." Paul looked at the assembled team, then back at Ivy. Despite the chaos around them, despite the uncertain future that lay ahead, he felt a surge of hope. "Let's move," he said, hefting the modified harmonic resonator. "We've got a planet to save." As they set off through the war-torn landscape of Zorna, Paul couldn't help but marvel at how far they had come. From separate worlds, separate species, they had become something new, something that might just be the key to survival. The Devourer's ships loomed overhead, their shadows casting darkness across the land. But Paul, Ivy, and their team pressed on, carrying with them the hopes of two civilizations and the power to change the course of the war. The broadcast location lay ahead, deep in enemy territory. As they moved through the rubble-strewn streets, Paul knew that every step brought them closer to either victory or annihilation. The fate of everything they knew hung in the balance, and the real battle was only just beginning. As Paul, Ivy, and their team advanced through the devastated streets of Zorna, the modified harmonic resonator pulsed with energy. The once pristine cityscape lay in ruins, buildings reduced to rubble and smoke billowing from countless fires. The air crackled with the distant sound of energy weapons and explosions. Suddenly, a group of injured Gorn civilians stumbled into view, their bioluminescent patterns flickering weakly. Blood and dust covered their scaled skin as they limped forward, eyes wide with terror. "Help us, please," one of them called out, voice trembling. Paul and Ivy exchanged a quick glance before moving to assist. As they approached, Paul's enhanced senses detected no immediate Devourer presence in the vicinity. "We can't leave them like this," Ivy said, already assessing the civilians' injuries. Lyra nodded in agreement. "We'll help, but we need to be quick." The team worked efficiently, applying emergency first aid and using their limited medical supplies to stabilize the most critical cases. Paul's technopathic abilities proved invaluable as he interfaced with a nearby medical drone, reprogramming it to assist in treating the wounded. "There's an underground shelter 2 blocks south," one of the hybrid warriors informed them, pointing down a side street. It should still be secure. As the last of the civilians were patched up, Ivy knelt beside a young Gorn child, her hands glowing softly as she used her abilities to accelerate the healing process. "You'll be safe there," she assured the child. "Stay quiet and hidden until help arrives." With the civilians directed to safety, the team resumed their mission, pushing deeper into Devourer-controlled territory. As they moved, Paul and Ivy noticed a strange sensation coursing through their bodies. It felt like a low-frequency vibration, barely perceptible but impossible to ignore. "Do you feel that?" Paul whispered to Ivy. She nodded, her bioluminescent patterns shifting in response. "It's like a hum in my bones." As they focused on the sensation, they realized it intensified whenever Devourer technology was nearby. This newfound ability allowed them to detect and avoid Devourer patrols with uncanny precision, guiding the team through the war-torn landscape undetected. Their path led them to a massive structure that loomed ominously against the smoke-filled sky. As they drew closer, the vibrations in their bodies grew stronger, almost painful in their intensity. "What is this place?" Lyra asked, her voice hushed. Paul's eyes widened as he interfaced with the building systems. "It's a Devourer processing facility," he said, horror evident in his voice. They found a vantage point overlooking the facility's interior, and what they saw chilled them to the core. Humans and Gorn, stripped of their clothing and dignity, were being forced into gruesome machines. Mechanical appendages pierced flesh and bone, injecting unknown substances and grafting cybernetic components onto screaming victims. Ivy turned away, unable to watch. "They're turning them into drones," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The sight galvanized the team, strengthening their perseverance to complete the mission and end the Devourer threat. They pushed on, their movements now charged with a new sense of urgency. As they neared their target, Paul spotted a towering communications array in the distance. Its distinctive Gorn architecture had been corrupted by Devourer modifications, creating a nightmarish fusion of organic and mechanical elements. "That's it," Paul said, pointing to the structure. "If we can connect the harmonic resonator to that array, we'll have the range we need to broadcast the disruptive signal." Lyra assessed the situation quickly. "My team and I can create a diversion, draw their forces away from the array. That should give you two a chance to get inside and set up the resonator." Paul nodded, grateful for Lyra's tactical expertise. "Be careful. We don't know how many Devourers are out there." As Lyra and her warriors moved to initiate their diversion, Paul and Ivy approached the base of the communications array. The structure seemed to pulse with malevolent energy, its surface a writhing mass of biomechanical components. "Ready?" Paul asked, looking at Ivy. She took a deep breath, her bioluminescent patterns glowing with grit. "Let's do this." With a shared nod, they began their ascent. Their hybrid physiology allowed them to scale the structure with incredible speed and agility, defying gravity as they climbed. Tendrils of Devourer tech reached out to impede their progress, but Paul's technopathic abilities kept them at bay, creating a path for them to follow. As they neared the top, the sound of explosions and weapons fire erupted from the direction Lyra and her team had gone. The diversion was working. Devourer forces were being drawn away from the array. Paul and Ivy reached the summit, finding themselves on a platform surrounded by pulsating organic circuitry. Without hesitation, Paul began the process of integrating the harmonic resonator with the array systems. "Cover me," he said to Ivy. "This is going to take a few minutes." As Paul worked, his fingers dancing over the resonator's controls, Ivy reached out with her mind, connecting to Zorna's core. She felt the planet's energy surging through her, wild and chaotic from the ongoing battle. With careful mental adjustments, she began to stabilize the power flow, channeling it to support Paul's efforts. The air around them crackled with energy as the harmonic resonator came online, its signal amplified by the massive array. But the emissions didn't go unnoticed. In the distance, a swarm of Devourer aerial units broke away from the main battle, vectoring towards their position. "Paul," Ivy warned, her eyes fixed on the approaching threat. "We've got company." He looked up from his work, assessing the situation quickly. "I need more time. Can you hold them off?" Ivy nodded, her body already beginning to glow with built-up energy. As the first wave of Devourer units descended upon them, she released a pulse of electromagnetic energy, sending several of the biomechanical monstrosities spiraling out of control. Paul divided his attention between completing the resonator's integration and using his technopathic abilities to disrupt the Devourer unit's control systems. Together, they formed a formidable defense, but the onslaught was relentless. Just as it seemed they might be overwhelmed, their communicators crackled to life with a familiar voice. "Paul, Ivy, can you hear me?" It was Dr. Rodriguez, her voice urgent but clear despite the interference. "We've completed the bioweapon. It's ready for deployment, but we need a way to disperse it across a wide area." Paul's mind raced, quickly connecting the dots. "The array," he said, excitement building in his voice. "We can use it to broadcast both the disruption signal and disperse the bioweapon." As he began modifying the resonator to accommodate this new function, Ivy coordinated with Gorn forces to arrange for the bioweapon's delivery. Time was running out. The Devourer forces were regrouping for another assault on their position. Suddenly, a Gorn transport ship broke through the chaotic skies, its hull scarred by weapons fire. As it approached the array, a barrage of Devourer fire struck its engines, sending it into a tailspin. "No!" Ivy cried out as the ship crash-landed near the base of the array, its wreckage a twisted mass of metal and Gorn biotech. Paul finished his modifications and turned to Ivy, his face grim. "We need that bioweapon. Without it, all of this is for nothing." Ivy's mind raced, considering their options. Then, her eyes lit up with a dangerous idea. "I can create a path," she said, her voice filled with drive. "But it's going to take everything I've got." Before Paul could protest, Ivy closed her eyes and reached out to Zorna's core once more. This time, she pushed her connection to its limits, tapping into the planet's gravitational field. The air around them began to shimmer and distort as Ivy manipulated the local gravity, creating a path of reduced gravitational pull between the crashed ship and their position atop the array. "Now!" she shouted through gritted teeth, her body trembling with the effort. One of Lyra's team members, who had just fought their way back to the array's base, understood immediately. The hybrid warrior leaped onto the gravitational pathway, bounding up its length with incredible speed, the bioweapon container clutched tightly in their arms. As the warrior reached the top and handed over the bioweapon, Ivy released her hold on the gravitational field. She stumbled, her bioluminescent patterns flickering weakly as she struggled to remain conscious. Paul caught her, supporting her weight as he began the final modifications to the harmonic resonator. The device hummed with power, now primed to broadcast both the hive mind disruption signal and disperse the bioweapon. But as he initiated the broadcast sequence, warning lights flashed across the resonator's display. The energy required was immense, and the damaged array's power source was faltering under the strain. Ivy, still leaning heavily against Paul, looked up at the failing systems. Her eyes met his, a mix of fear and tenacity evident in her gaze. "I can channel energy from Zorna's core," she said, her voice weak but determined, "through my body into the array. It's the only way to power the broadcast." Paul's heart clenched as he understood the implications. In her weakened state, such an effort could easily prove fatal. "Ivy, no!" He started to protest, but she cut him off with a gentle touch to his cheek. "We don't have a choice," she said softly. "This is bigger than us." As Paul stood frozen, torn between the mission's imperative and his feelings for Ivy, the sounds of battle grew closer. Devourer forces were closing in, their hive mind driving them forward with single-minded purpose. Time was running out. The fate of Zorna, Earth, and countless other worlds hung in the balance. Paul looked into Ivy's eyes, seeing his own conflict reflected there, as they faced the most difficult decision of their lives. Paul's mind raced, weighing the options before them. The fate of countless worlds hung in the balance, but the thought of losing Ivy was unbearable. "Wait," Paul said, his voice tight with urgency. "I have an idea." His fingers flew over the harmonic resonator's controls, reconfiguring its systems with lightning speed. The device hummed and pulsed as he worked, its inner workings adapting to his commands. "What are you doing?" Ivy asked, her bioluminescent patterns flickering weakly. "Modifying the resonator," Paul explained, his eyes never leaving the device. "It can act as a conduit for Zorna's energy, channeling it more efficiently. This should reduce the strain on your body." Ivy's eyes widened as she understood. "But will it be enough?" Paul met her gaze, his expression a mix of hope and fear. "It has to be." As he finished the modifications, the sounds of battle grew louder. Devourer forces were closing in, their relentless advance threatening to overwhelm their position. "Now, Ivy!" Paul shouted. Ivy closed her eyes, reaching out to Zorna's core. The air around her shimmered as she connected with the planet's energy. The harmonic resonator began to glow, its light intensifying as it channeled the immense power. Paul activated the device, his heart pounding as he watched the energy level spike. The effect was immediate and dramatic. A wave of energy burst forth from the array, rippling through the air in concentric circles. In orbit, Devourer ships lost coordination, colliding with each other or veering off course. On the ground, the invading forces began to twitch and convulse as the bioweapon took effect. The hive mind disruption signals severed the psychic link between the Devourers, sowing confusion and chaos among their ranks. But the massive energy surge had unforeseen consequences. The communication array groaned and shuddered, its structure straining under the enormous power flowing through it. "We need to get out of here," Paul yelled over the noise of creaking metal and crackling energy. As they turned to descend, a section of the array collapsed with a deafening crash. Paul stumbled back, barely maintaining his footing. When he looked up, his blood ran cold. Ivy was on the other side of the gap, clinging precariously to a damaged section of the structure. "Ivy!" he called out, reaching for her. She tried to respond, but her words were lost in the chaos. Her grip was weakening, the physical toll of channeling Zorna's energy evident in her trembling arms. From below, Lyra and her team sprang into action. They scaled the unstable array with incredible speed, their hybrid abilities allowing them to navigate the treacherous structure. "Hold on," Lyra shouted as she reached Paul. "We'll get to her." But before they could act, a group of Devourer stragglers launched a desperate attack on the array's base. The structure swayed dangerously, further complicating their rescue efforts. Paul's mind raced, calculating angles and distances. Without a word, he backed up, his muscles tensing. "Paul, what are you—" Lyra began, but he was already moving. With a burst of speed, Paul sprinted towards a gap. He launched himself into the air, his enhanced strength and agility propelling him across the chasm. For a heart-stopping moment, he hung suspended over the dizzying drop. Then his hand closed around Ivy's wrist just as her fingers slipped from their hold. They dangled precariously, Paul's other hand gripping a twisted piece of metal. The strain was immense, but he refused to let go. Suddenly, the harmonic resonator began to emit a high-pitched whine. Paul's enhanced senses picked up the device's distress signals. It was overheating, on the verge of explosion. "The resonator," he called out to Lyra. "If it explodes, It could reverse the effects. With one arm holding Ivy and the other clinging to the structure, Paul closed his eyes, focusing his technopathic abilities. He reached out to the resonator, interfacing with its systems remotely. As he initiated the shutdown sequence, he felt the device's resistance, its circuits fighting against his commands. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he pushed harder, forcing the resonator to comply. Just as the whine reached a fever pitch, the device powered down, its lights fading to darkness. Lyra and her team reached them at last, securing harnesses around Paul and Ivy. As they began their descent, the communication array gave a final groan before collapsing entirely. They raced against time, dodging falling debris as they made their way to the ground. Their feet had barely touched the earth when a medical team rushed forward, led by Dr. Rodriguez. They whisked Paul and Ivy away to a secure facility, the doctor's face etched with concern as she assessed their conditions. As Paul drifted in and out of consciousness, he caught fragments of conversation. Words like success, retreat, and victory floated around him. But his focus remained on Ivy, her hand clasped tightly in his as they both fought to recover from their ordeal. In the days that followed, as strength slowly returned to his body, Paul began to piece together the full scope of what they had accomplished. The Devourer invasion had been halted, their forces either incapacitated or scattered. But the fight was just getting started. Uncoordinated Devourer units still posed a threat, requiring careful planning to neutralize. As he sat by Ivy's bedside, watching her bioluminescent patterns slowly regain their vibrancy, Paul's mind turned to the future. The data from the harmonic resonator's broadcast had revealed something unexpected: dormant precursor technology on nearby planets, activated by their signal. He leaned forward, gently squeezing Ivy's hand. Her eyes fluttered open, focusing on him with a tired smile. "How are you feeling?" he asked softly. "Like I channeled the energy of an entire planet," she replied with a weak chuckle. "So, what's next?" Paul's eyes lit up with excitement. "You won't believe what we've discovered." Discovered. Paul's eyes gleamed with excitement as he began to explain the unexpected findings from the harmonic resonator's broadcast. Ivy listened intently, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing with renewed vigor as she absorbed the implications of their discovery. The activation of dormant precursor technology on nearby planets opened up a world of possibilities and potential dangers. As they discussed plans for an expedition to investigate these sites, Dr. Rodriguez entered the medical bay, her face a mixture of concern and urgency. "Paul, Ivy," she said, her voice tense. "I need you both to come with me immediately. There's been a development regarding your hybrid physiology that we need to address." Exchanging worried glances, Paul and Ivy followed Dr. Rodriguez to a secure wing of the research facility. The doctor led them into a room filled with advanced medical equipment, some of human design, others clearly of Gorn origin. "We've been monitoring your cellular activity since the incident with the harmonic resonator," Dr. Rodriguez explained, bringing up holographic displays of their genetic structures. "Your hybrid bodies are continuing to evolve at an accelerated rate. If left unchecked, it could lead to serious complications." Paul studied the displays, his technopathic abilities allowing him to interface with the data directly. "What kind of complications are we talking about, Doctor?" Dr. Rodriguez's expression grew grave. "Organ failure, neural degradation, potentially even complete cellular breakdown. We need to act now to stabilize your physiology." Ivy's bioluminescent patterns flickered with anxiety. "What do you propose?" The doctor activated another holographic display, showcasing a complex medical procedure. "We've developed an experimental treatment using a combination of precursor technology and advanced Gorn medical techniques. It should stabilize your hybrid physiology while preserving your enhanced abilities." Paul and Ivy listened intently as Dr. Rodriguez outlined the procedure. The treatment involved submerging them in pods filled with a luminescent fluid derived from precursor technology. The process would take several days, during which their bodies would undergo significant changes at the cellular level. However, Dr. Rodriguez cautioned, there are risks. This treatment could alter your genetic makeup further, with unknown consequences for your future development. Paul and Ivy looked at each other, a silent communication passing between them. After everything they had been through, the decision wasn't difficult. We'll do it, Paul said firmly, with Ivy nodding in agreement. The next few hours were a flurry of activity as the medical team prepared for the procedure. Paul and Ivy underwent a series of preparatory tests, their bodies scanned and analyzed down to the molecular level. As they were about to be placed in the treatment pods, Paul reached out and squeezed Ivy's hand. "See you on the other side," he said with a small smile. Ivy's patterns glowed warmly in response. "We've faced worse than this. We'll get through it together." The pod sealed around them, filling with the luminescent precursor fluid. As the treatment began, Paul and Ivy felt a tingling sensation spreading through their bodies. Their consciousness began to drift, the world outside the pods fading away. Days passed in a dreamlike haze. Paul and Ivy floated in a state between waking and sleeping, aware of changes occurring within their bodies, but unable to fully comprehend them. Occasionally, they caught glimpses of Dr. Rodriguez and her team monitoring their progress, their faces a mix of fascination and concern. On the 5th day of treatment, something unexpected occurred. Paul's pod suddenly pulsed with intense energy, the precursor fluid surrounding him glowing with a brilliant blue light. His body began to levitate within the pod, his skin emitting a similar radiance. Ivy's pod reacted almost immediately, her body mirroring Paul's levitation. Golden light emanated from her skin, creating a harmonious resonance with the blue glow from Paul's pod. Alarms blared throughout the facility as the energy levels continued to spike. Dr. Rodriguez and her team worked frantically to stabilize the situation, but the pods had entered a self-sustaining cycle, drawing power from an unknown source. As the energy field expanded, it began to interfere with the facility's systems. Lights flickered and equipment shut down across the complex. The pods, however, remained active, their glow intensifying with each passing moment. Outside the facility, the effects of the energy surge became apparent. Weather patterns across Zorna began to shift dramatically, and seismic sensors detected increased activity planet-wide. The Gorn High Council, alerted to the situation, ordered the immediate evacuation of areas surrounding the research facility. As chaos unfolded around them, Paul and Ivy remained suspended in their pods, their bodies continuing to transform. The energy field emanating from the pods expanded further, enveloping the entire research facility in a shimmering dome of light. Unbeknownst to those on Zorna, the energy surge had triggered a response from the precursor technology Paul and Ivy had discovered on nearby planets. Defense systems long dormant sprang to life, creating an energy shield that encompassed Zorna and several neighboring worlds. In orbit, Gorn and human ships detected a powerful signal broadcasting from the research facility into deep space. Its purpose and destination were unknown, but its strength continued to increase, raising fears of attracting unwanted attention from other spacefaring species. As the situation reached a critical point, Dr. Rodriguez made a desperate attempt to terminate the treatment process. Her fingers flew over the control panels, inputting emergency shutdown codes. But the pods remained active, resisting all attempts to power them down. Inside the pods, Paul and Ivy's minds began to expand, their consciousness stretching beyond the confines of their physical forms. They became aware of each other's presence, their thoughts and emotions intertwining in ways they had never experienced before. As their shared consciousness grew, they began to perceive patterns in the energy surrounding them. The signal being broadcast into space took on new meaning, revealing itself as a vast repository of knowledge, a combination of human and Gorn biology, precursor technology, and something entirely new, the fate of Zorna, and potentially the entire galaxy, hung in the balance as Paul and Ivy's transformation continued. The energy field pulsed with increasing intensity, its effects rippling across the planet and beyond. As the Gorn High Council and human leaders grappled with the unfolding crisis, the universe itself seemed to hold its breath, awaiting the outcome of this unprecedented event. The energy field pulsed with increasing intensity, its effects rippling across the planet and beyond. As the Gorn High Council and human leaders grappled with the unfolding crisis, Dr. Rodriguez and her team worked tirelessly to regain control of the situation. Sweat beaded on Dr. Rodriguez's forehead as she input a series of complex commands into the facility's main computer. Her fingers flew across the holographic interface, lines of code streaming across the screen. "Containment field activated," she announced, her voice strained with exhaustion and tension. The room hummed as a shimmering barrier materialized around the medical wing, halting the expansion of the energy field emanating from Paul and Ivy's pods. Alarms ceased their incessant wailing, replaced by the steady beep of monitoring equipment. Dr. Rodriguez exhaled slowly, allowing herself a moment of relief before turning to address her team. "We've bought ourselves some time. Now, let's figure out what's happening to our patients." As the medical team pored over data streaming from the pods, Lyra found herself light years away, standing before an ancient doorway deep within the precursor moon site. Her team of Gorn and human scientists huddled around her, their breath visible in the cold, stale air of the newly discovered chamber. "Are you sure about this?" asked Dr. Crow, his scaled fingers hovering over a complex series of glyphs etched into the stone. Lyra nodded, her eyes fixed on the door. "We need answers. Whatever's in there might help us understand what's happening back on Zorna." With a deep breath, she pressed her hand against the central glyph. The stone beneath her palm grew warm, then hot, before the entire door began to glow with an eerie blue light. With a low rumble, it slid open, revealing a cavernous space beyond. The team entered cautiously, their footsteps echoing in the vast chamber. At its center stood a crystalline structure, pulsing with a soft, rhythmic light. As they approached, the crystal flared to life, projecting a holographic interface that filled the air around them. "By the ancestors," whispered one of the Gorn scientists, his eyes wide with wonder. Lyra stepped forward, her hand outstretched towards the shimmering display. As her fingers brushed against it, the interface responded, lines of alien text scrolling across her vision. It's an AI," she breathed. "A precursor artificial intelligence system." The holographic display shifted, forming into a humanoid figure composed of intricate, flowing lines of light. When it spoke, its voice resonated through the chamber, carrying the weight of eons. "Welcome, descendants," it intoned. "You have awakened this system in response to a galactic distress call." Lyra's heart raced. "The signal from Zorna? From our friends in the medical facility?" The AI nodded, its form rippling like water. "The signal you detected is part of an ancient failsafe protocol designed to activate in times of great peril. Your companions have unknowingly triggered a call to arms, reaching out to precursor outposts scattered across the stars." Back on Zorna, Dr. Rodriguez watched with a mixture of fascination and trepidation as the intense glow surrounding Paul and Ivy's pods began to subside. The energy field that had threatened to engulf the entire facility retreated, condensing into a shimmering aura around their bodies. "Vital signs stabilizing," reported one of her assistants, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Their genetic structure. It's unlike anything we've ever seen." Dr. Rodriguez leaned in, studying the holographic display of Paul and Ivy's DNA. The double helix had transformed, incorporating new sequences that defied classification. Human and Gorn genetic markers intertwined seamlessly, punctuated by stretches of code that could only be a precursor origin. As she watched, the pods hissed open, releasing a cloud of luminescent mist. Paul and Ivy stirred, their eyes fluttering open. Their skin seemed to shimmer, as if lit from within by a soft, pulsing light. "How do you feel?" Dr. Rodriguez asked, her hand hovering over a medical scanner. Paul sat up slowly, flexing his fingers as if seeing them for the first time. "Different," he said, his voice resonating with a new depth. "Stronger. Clearer." Ivy nodded in agreement, her bioluminescent patterns dancing across her skin with increased vibrancy. "It's like I can feel the world around me in ways I never could before." As they spoke, a look of surprise passed between them. Paul's eyes widened. "Ivy, did you just—" She nodded, a smile spreading across her face. "I heard you. In my mind." Dr. Rodriguez watched in amazement as Paul and Ivy carried on a silent conversation, their expressions changing in response to unspoken words. When they turned their attention back to her, their eyes gleamed with a new intelligence. "Doctor," Paul said, his voice carrying a note of urgency, "we need to contact the precursor ships entering the system." Dr. Rodriguez blinked in surprise. "How did you know about—" Ivy gestured to a nearby console, which sprang to life at her mere proximity. "We can sense them. Their technology. It's like an extension of ourselves now." As Paul and Ivy began to explain their newfound abilities, alarms blared throughout the facility. On screens throughout the room, long-range sensors displayed multiple objects entering the Zornan star system, the precursor ships responding to the distress call. In the Gorn High Council chambers, debates raged over how to respond to these unprecedented events. Some counselors called for caution, advocating for Paul and Ivy to be isolated and studied. Others saw opportunity in their transformation, arguing for their immediate integration into leadership roles. Amidst the chaos of arguments and counter-arguments, a transmission cut through the noise. Paul and Ivy's faces appeared on the main display, their expressions resolute. "Honored counselors," Paul began, his voice carrying a new authority. "We understand your concerns, but time is of the essence. We must make contact with the precursor ships before it's too late." Ivy nodded in agreement. "Our transformation has given us the ability to interface with their technology. We may be the only ones capable of establishing meaningful communication." The council chamber fell silent as the implications of their words sank in. Finally, the High Counselor spoke, his voice grave. "And if we refuse?" Paul and Ivy exchanged a glance before responding in unison, their voices blending in perfect harmony. "Then we go alone." Hours later, a small craft equipped with hybrid technology lifted off from Zorna's surface, carrying Paul and Ivy towards the unknown. As they ascended through the atmosphere, they felt the planet's defensive systems respond to their presence, energy fields parting to allow them passage. As they approached the nearest precursor vessel, its immense form dwarfing their small craft, Paul and Ivy linked their minds with their ship's systems. The craft responded instantly, maneuvering through the complex energy fields surrounding the ancient vessel with impossible precision. A beam of light extended from the precursor ship, enveloping their craft and drawing them in. As they passed through the energy field and into a vast docking bay, Paul and Ivy felt a sense of homecoming wash over them. They stepped onto the deck of the precursor ship, their enhanced senses drinking in every detail of the organic-looking architecture and pulsing energy conduits. As they moved deeper into the vessel, holographic interfaces sprang to life around them, responding to their hybrid physiology. Paul reached out, his fingers brushing against a shimmering display. Information flooded his mind. The true history of precursors, the nature of the devourer threat, and the vast network of defensive systems lying dormant throughout the galaxy. Ivy's eyes widened as she absorbed the knowledge alongside him. "Paul," she whispered, her voice filled with awe and trepidation. "Do you realize what this means?" He nodded, the weight of their discovery settling upon his shoulders. "We're the key to activating the Precursor's superweapons. The fate of not just Zorna, but the entire galaxy, may rest in our hands." As they stood there, surrounded by the legacy of an ancient civilization and faced with a decision that could alter the course of history, Paul and Ivy knew that their journey was just getting started. The true test of their newfound abilities and the strength of their bond was only just beginning. The true test of their newfound abilities and the strength of their bond was only just starting to unfold. Paul and Ivy exchanged a meaningful glance, their minds synchronizing in silent agreement. They needed to return to Zorna immediately. With a thought, they interfaced with the precursor ship systems, initiating a departure sequence. The ancient vessel hummed to life, energy pulsing through its organic-looking corridors as it prepared for the journey back. As they navigated through the complex energy field surrounding Zorna, Paul's enhanced senses detected subtle fluctuations in the planet's defensive grid. "They've been busy while we were gone," he remarked, noting the integration of precursor technology into the existing defenses. Ivy nodded, her bioluminescent patterns shifting in response to the data streaming through her mind. "Let's hope it's enough." Their small craft descended through Zorna's atmosphere, guided by an escort of hybrid human-Gorn fighters. As they touched down on the landing pad of a high-security facility, Paul and Ivy could sense the tension permeating the air. A delegation of Gorn and human officials awaited them, their faces etched with a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. Without a word, Paul and Ivy were ushered into a heavily guarded conference room where the joint human-Gorn leadership had assembled. The High Counselor's scales shimmered under the harsh lighting as he addressed the room. "Paul, Ivy, what have you discovered?" Paul stepped forward, his eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. He raised his hand, and a holographic display materialized in the center of the room, showing intricate schematics of the precursor superweapons. "The precursors left behind a network of defensive systems," Paul explained, his voice resonating with newfound authority. "Superweapons capable of repelling even the Devourer threat. And we have the ability to activate them." Murmurs rippled through the assembled leaders. A human admiral leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "How can we be sure these weapons won't pose a threat to us as well?" Ivy stepped up beside Paul, her skin pulsing with vibrant patterns. "The weapons are keyed to our hybrid physiology. We can control them, ensure they're used only against the Devourers." The room erupted into heated debate. Some leaders argued for immediate action, while others voiced concerns about the potential consequences of wielding such power. The discussion reached a fever pitch when suddenly alarms blared throughout the facility. A Gorn technician burst into the room, his scales pale with urgency. "Long-range sensors have detected a massive energy surge at the edge of our system. It's the Devourers." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The High Counselor's voice cut through the tension. "How long do we have?" "At their current speed, less than 48 hours, the technician replied. The human admiral stood, her face set with dedication. "We need to act now. Paul, Ivy, can you locate the nearest superweapon?" Paul nodded, interfacing with the facility's systems to project a star map. "Here," he said, highlighting a point in a nearby system. "We can reach it within 24 hours using our hybrid ship." The High Counselor turned to the assembled leaders. "We have no choice. We must prepare for a two-pronged strategy. Paul and Ivy will seek out and activate the superweapon, while we bolster Zorna's defenses." As the meeting adjourned and preparations began in earnest, Dr. Rodriguez approached Paul and Ivy, her face etched with concern. "I need to speak with you both," she said, leading them to a quiet corner. "What is it, Doctor?" Ivy asked, sensing the woman's unease. Dr. Rodriguez took a deep breath. "I've been analyzing your latest genetic scans. Your hybrid physiology, it's still evolving. Activating the precursor superweapons could accelerate the process. We don't know what that might do to you. Paul and Ivy exchanged a glance, their minds linking to process this new information. After a moment, Paul spoke. We understand the risks, Doctor, but we have to try. As they made their way to the launch bay, they found Lyra waiting for them. The Gorn scientist's eyes shimmered with a mix of pride and worry. I'll be coordinating Zorna's defense from here, she said. We've integrated precursor shield technology into our grid. It should buy us some time. Paul clasped Lyra's scaled hand. We'll be back before you know it. They boarded the Nexus, their newly constructed hybrid vessel. As Paul and Ivy settled into the neural interface chairs, the ship came to life around them, systems responding to their very thoughts. The launch bay doors slid open, revealing the stars beyond. As the Nexus lifted off, Paul and Ivy caught a glimpse of Zorna's defense fleet mobilizing, a mix of human and Gorn ships, now dripping with precursor technology. As they broke through the atmosphere, Paul and Ivy's minds merged with the ship systems. The vast expanse of space opened up before them, filled with possibilities and dangers. They set a course for the coordinates of the nearest precursor superweapon, their hybrid vessel cutting through the void at impossible speeds. During the journey, they delved into the precursor knowledge stored within the ship's databases, searching for any information that might aid them in activating the superweapon. Images and concepts flowed through their minds, ancient secrets unfolding before them. As they approached their destination, a distant star system devoid of life, Ivy suddenly tensed. Paul, are you sensing that? He nodded, a frown creasing his brow. Energy signatures, similar to the Devourer ships we encountered before. They shared a look of iron will. It seemed their mission had not gone unnoticed. As the Nexus dropped out of faster-than-light travel, the system's sun illuminated the sleek hull of their ship. In the distance, dark shapes moved against the starfield, Devourer scout ships closing in fast. Paul's hands flew over the controls, activating the Nexus's advanced cloaking technology. Let's hope this works, he muttered as the ship's exterior shimmered and faded from view. Ivy interfaced with the weapon systems, her mind racing through combat scenarios. We may have to fight our way through, she said, her voice tight with concentration. As they maneuvered deeper into the system, the precursor superweapon's energy signature grew stronger. But so did the presence of the Devourer forces. The mission to activate the galaxy's last, best hope for survival, had become a race against time, and a deadly game of cat and mouse. Paul and Ivy steeled themselves for the challenges ahead, their evolving abilities humming with untapped potential. The fate of Zorna, Earth, and countless other worlds hung in the balance as they pushed forward, the true test of their newfound powers about to begin. The Nexus glided through the star system, its cloaking technology rendering it nearly invisible against the backdrop of space. Paul and Ivy's minds were in perfect sync with the ship's systems, their enhanced senses on high alert for any sign of danger. Suddenly, Ivy's bioluminescent patterns flickered. Paul, I'm detecting energy signatures. Devourer scouts, closing in fast. Paul's fingers danced across the holographic interface. I see them. 5 ships, attack formation. We should be able to. His words were cut short as the Nexus shuddered violently. A surge of energy pulsed through the ship's precursor-derived systems, briefly illuminating their position. Damn it, Paul muttered. They've spotted us. The space around them erupted into chaos as the Devourer scouts opened fire. Paul and Ivy moved in perfect unison, their hybrid physiology allowing them to interface directly with the Nexus's weapon systems. Ivy's eyes glowed with an otherworldly light as she took control of the ship's energy cannons. Streams of concentrated plasma lanced out, striking the first Devourer ship with pinpoint accuracy. The scout vessel erupted in a silent explosion, scattering debris across the starfield. Paul's mind raced through evasive maneuvers, the Nexus responding to his thoughts faster than any conventional pilot could react. The ship rolled and twisted, narrowly avoiding a barrage of enemy fire. 2 more incoming. Ivy called out, her voice tight with concentration. Paul gritted his teeth. I see them. Brace for impact. The Nexus shuddered as a glancing blow struck its port side. Warning signals flashed across the neural interface, indicating damage to the propulsion system. Ivy retaliated, firing a spread of energy torpedoes that caught the remaining Devourer scouts off guard. 2 more explosions lit up the darkness of space. As the last enemy ship disintegrated under their combined assault, Paul and Ivy shared a moment of relief. However, their victory was short-lived as the ship's alarms blared. The propulsion system is failing, Paul announced, his fingers flying over the controls. We need to set down for repairs. Ivy scanned their surroundings. There's a moon nearby. Harsh conditions, but it's our best option. The Nexus limped towards a desolate moon, its hull groaning under the strain. As they entered the thin, toxic atmosphere, Paul and Ivy donned their environmental suits, enhanced with precursor technology to withstand the extreme conditions. They touched down on the moon's barren surface, a landscape of jagged rocks and deep crevasses stretching out before them. The suit's sensors immediately began relaying data about the hostile environment, extreme temperature fluctuations, toxic gases, and dangerous levels of radiation. Paul and Ivy exited the Nexus, their boots crunching on the moon's regolith. They moved in tandem towards the ship's damaged section, their hybrid abilities allowing them to interface directly with the Nexus's systems. As they worked to repair the propulsion system, Ivy's enhanced senses picked up an anomaly. Paul, are you detecting this? There's an energy signature coming from beneath the surface. Paul paused, focusing his senses. You're right. It's faint but definitely artificial. Precursor technology? They exchanged a look, their minds already in agreement. This discovery could be crucial to their mission. We should investigate, Ivy said, her voice filled with a mix of excitement and apprehension. They followed the energy signature to a narrow crevasse. As they descended, the walls around them began to change, smooth surfaces replacing rough rock. They found themselves standing before a hidden entrance, pulsing with faint precursor energy. Paul placed his hand on the door, and it responded to his hybrid physiology, sliding open with a soft hiss. They stepped inside, their suit lights illuminating a vast chamber filled with ancient technology. It's a precursor outpost, Ivy breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. As they moved deeper into the facility, holographic displays sprang to life around them. Paul interfaced with a central console, and a flood of information poured into his mind. Ivy, this is incredible, he said, his voice filled with awe. It's a database containing detailed schematics of the superweapon we're looking for. Before Ivy could respond, the room hummed with energy. A disembodied voice, speaking in an ancient language they somehow understood, echoed through the chamber. Hybrid entities detected, initiating worthiness protocol. The floor beneath them began to shift, revealing a series of platforms and obstacles. Paul and Ivy realized they were about to face a test, one that would challenge both their physical abilities and their understanding of precursor technology. As they prepared to face the trials that lay ahead, Paul and Ivy knew that the fate of their mission, and perhaps the entire galaxy, could hinge on their performance in this hidden precursor outpost. The ancient machinery hummed to life around them, responding to their hybrid physiology. As they navigated through a series of increasingly complex challenges, Paul and Ivy's abilities were pushed to their limits. Hours passed as they deciphered precursor puzzles, manipulated energy fields, and interfaced with alien technology. Finally, they reached the heart of the facility, where a holographic display materialized before them. Hybrid entities, the disembodied voice intoned, you have proven yourselves worthy. Access granted to precursor superweapon schematics and activation protocols. Paul and Ivy exchanged a triumphant glance as the information flooded their minds. With the crucial data secured, they hurried back to the Nexus, aware that time was running short. As they approached their ship, Paul's expression turned grave. "Ivy, we need to split up. The data shows that the superweapon is located in a distant system. If we both go, we might not make it back to Zorna in time to help with the defense." Ivy nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "I'll take the Nexus back to Zorna and coordinate the defense. You take the precursor shuttle we found here. It's better equipped to navigate to the superweapon's location." They shared a brief, intense moment of connection, their hybrid abilities allowing them to communicate volumes without words. Then, with a final nod, they parted ways. Paul boarded the sleek precursor shuttle, its systems immediately responding to his touch. As he lifted off from the moon's surface, he watched the Nexus disappear into faster-than-light travel, Ivy at its helm. Turning his attention to the task ahead, Paul input the coordinates for the superweapon's location. The shuttle's advanced navigation system plotted a course through uncharted space, and Paul braced himself for the journey. As he ventured deeper into the unknown, a series of ancient beacons began to activate, responding to his hybrid physiology. They created a trail of energy signatures, guiding him towards his destination. Paul followed the path, his enhanced reflexes put to the test as he navigated through treacherous asteroid fields and past unstable star systems. Meanwhile, Ivy arrived at Zorna aboard the Nexus, emerging from faster-than-light travel to find the planet under heavy assault from the Devourer fleet. Without hesitation, she interfaced with the ship's systems, integrating it into Zorna's defense grid. "This is Ivy aboard the Nexus," she communicated to the planet's defense command. "I'm patching into your systems now. Prepare for a boost to your shield strength." Through her connection with the Nexus, Ivy coordinated multiple defense systems simultaneously. The efficiency of Zorna's counterattacks improved dramatically as she anticipated Devourer movements and redirected defensive fire with lightning speed. On the planet's surface, Lyra led a team of hybrid warriors against Devourer ground forces that had breached the outer defenses. Her scales shimmered with bioluminescent patterns as she barked orders to her squad. Team Alpha, flank left. Beta, provide covering fire. Lyra's enhanced abilities allowed her to process the battlefield dynamics at an unprecedented rate, anticipating and countering Devourer tactics with uncanny precision. The hybrid warriors moved with fluid grace, their bodies enhanced by a combination of Gorn and human DNA. They wielded an array of weapons, from conventional plasma rifles to precursor-derived energy weapons that pulsed with otherworldly power. In a secure underground facility, Dr. Rodriguez worked feverishly, surrounded by holographic displays and complex genetic sequencers. She had made a breakthrough in replicating Paul and Ivy's hybrid physiology, developing a prototype treatment that could enhance a limited number of volunteers. "High Counselor," Dr. Rodriguez addressed the Gorn leader via holographic communication, "the prototype is ready. We can begin treating key military personnel immediately." The High Counselor's scaled visage nodded gravely. "Proceed, Doctor. Time is of the essence." As the battle for Zorna raged on, Paul finally reached the star system containing the precursor superweapon. The shuttle sensors detected a massive space station hidden within the intense radiation field of a pulsar. Paul gritted his teeth as he maneuvered the shuttle through the hazardous environment. The craft's advanced shielding, combined with his enhanced senses, allowed him to navigate the lethal radiation exposure. Upon docking with the space station, Paul was immediately confronted by an automated defense system. Streams of energy crackled around him as he interfaced with the station's systems, his hybrid DNA proving his compatibility. Identity confirmed. Access granted. The station's AI intoned. Paul moved deeper into the station, dormant systems springing to life around him. He found himself in a vast chamber, dominated by a colossal energy projection device, the superweapon itself. As Paul approached the control center, he felt a surge of energy course through his body. He interfaced directly with the weapon systems, initiating the activation sequence. The pain was intense, but he pushed through, knowing the fate of both human and Gorn civilizations hung in the balance. Back on Zorna, Ivy suddenly stiffened in her neural interface chair aboard the Nexus. She sensed the energy surge from the superweapon through her telepathic link with Paul. "All Allied ships, this is Ivy," she broadcast. "Prepare for an incoming energy wave. Engage all protective measures now." As the superweapon reached full power, it released a massive pulse of energy that rippled across space. The wave struck the Devourer fleet attacking Zorna, causing their ships to lose cohesion and drift aimlessly. On the planet's surface, the Devourer ground forces collapsed, their connection to the hive mind suddenly severed. The tide of battle turned dramatically, but new challenges immediately arose. Some Devourer ships, now acting independently, became even more aggressive and unpredictable. Others drifted dangerously close to populated areas. As Ivy coordinated with Lyra to begin cleanup operations, reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The energy wave had affected Devourer-controlled areas far beyond the Zornan system, creating widespread disruption of the hive mind. In the precursor station, Paul initiated the superweapon's shutdown sequence, his body reeling from the intense energy exposure. As he prepared to leave, a cryptic message flashed across the station's communication systems. "Hybrid One, your actions have not gone unnoticed. An ancient power stirs. Prepare for contact." Paul stared at the message, a mix of exhaustion and trepidation washing over him. As he made his way back to the shuttle, he knew that this victory, hard-won as it was, might only be the beginning of an even greater challenge. As Paul prepared to leave the precursor station, the cryptic message on the screen suddenly shifted, its meaning becoming clearer. The ancient power stirring was not a threat, but an invitation. Paul's fingers flew over the console, decoding the message. His eyes widened as he realized its significance. "The architects," he breathed, his mind racing with the implications. The original creators of the precursors themselves. Without hesitation, he accessed the station's advanced communication array, sending a message to Zorna. "Ivy, it's Paul. I've made contact with an ancient race called the Architects. They're the ones behind the precursors. I'm going to investigate further. This could change everything." On Zorna, Ivy received Paul's message as she coordinated the cleanup efforts. Her decision was immediate. "Lyra," she called over the comm, "I need to join Paul. Can you handle things here?" Lyra's voice crackled back, filled with purpose. "Go. We've got this covered." Ivy boarded the Nexus, now further enhanced with salvaged Devourer technology. As she prepared for departure, she reached out with her hybrid abilities, connecting to Zorna's planetary core. With a surge of energy, she stabilized the planet's systems one last time, ensuring its safety in her absence. The Nexus hummed to life, its systems responding to Ivy's touch as she set a course for Paul's location. The stars blurred around her as the ship entered faster-than-light travel. Meanwhile, Paul delved deeper into the precursor station's databanks, interfacing directly with its systems. Information flooded his mind, revealing the true nature of the Architects. "They seeded life throughout the galaxy," he muttered, all filling his voice. "Humans, Gorn, all of us, were their creations." He learned of the Architects' self-imposed exile, their watchful vigil over the civilizations they had sparked into existence. As he absorbed this knowledge, the Nexus emerged from hyperspace, docking with the station. Ivy strode into the control room, her eyes locking with Paul's. Their hybrid physiologies resonated, strengthening their bond. Without a word, they embraced, their connection allowing them to share the weight of their discoveries. Together, They turned to the console, deciphering the coordinates hidden within the architect's message. "It's beyond anything we've explored," Ivy said, her voice filled with a mix of excitement and apprehension. Before departing, they compiled a comprehensive report, detailing their discoveries and intentions. Paul transmitted it back to Zorna, addressing it to Lyra and Dr. Rodriguez. "We're entrusting you with the future of our people," he said. "Continue the hybrid program. Maintain the peace between humans and Gorn. We're heading into the unknown." With their message sent, Paul and Ivy boarded the Nexus. Their hybrid abilities allowed them to fully integrate with the ship's systems, becoming one with the vessel. As they followed the coordinates, they passed through regions of space previously thought impassable. Cosmic phenomena beyond imagination unfolded before them. They witnessed the birth of stars and stellar nurseries, navigated the edges of black holes, and sailed through nebulae of impossible colors. Finally, after a journey that seemed to bend the very fabric of space-time, they arrived at their destination. Before them loomed a massive Dyson sphere, hidden within a fold of reality. Its surface gleamed with an otherworldly light, patterns of energy dancing across its immense expanse. As they approached, an energy field enveloped the Nexus, guiding it gently towards a docking port. The ship settled into place with a soft hum, its systems interfacing seamlessly with the sphere's technology. Paul and Ivy stepped out onto the surface, their enhanced senses overwhelmed by the advanced technology surrounding them. The ground beneath their feet pulsed with energy, responding to their presence. Suddenly, beings of pure light materialized before them. The architects, entities of unimaginable power and knowledge, had come to greet their creations. A voice, or perhaps a multitude of voices, resonated in their minds. "Welcome, children of our design. You have proven yourselves worthy of the next step in your evolution." Paul and Ivy stood in awe as the architects began to reveal the true purpose behind the creation of humans, Gorn, and countless other species across the galaxy. They learned of the grand design, the ultimate goal of creating hybrid beings capable of joining the architects as guardians of the cosmos. As the full scope of their potential destiny unfolded before them, Paul and Ivy exchanged a look of understanding. They stood on the precipice of a decision that would not only change their lives, but potentially shape the future of the entire galaxy. The architect's offer hung in the air, a challenge and an opportunity beyond anything they could have imagined. As Paul and Ivy considered their next move, the vastness of the universe seemed to stretch out before them, filled with endless possibilities and untold adventures.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.